name is Heather, and this is yet another stream of the 1993 Menendez brothers trial. We are rewatching it, some of us for the first time. This is my first time I've ever seen all this testimony. I've seen bits and pieces in like documentaries, but I've never actually watched the whole trial. So this is all new to me. Let me know in the comments below if this is new to you, if this is the second, third time around you're watching this. You know, how often have you watched this trial? Let me know in the comments. All right. So we are on part 2 of Judalon Smyth. Judalon Smyth is the psychiatrist or psychologist, I should say, not a PhD doctor, but a psychologist. Sorry, a psychologist, or maybe he did have a doctorate. Is he a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Now I want to know. Anyways, he treated Eric Menendez. He lost his license for a lot of unethical and devious behavior, some of which was after the boys, because he was Eric's therapist. Eric confessed the crimes to him about the homicides of his parents that were committed by him and Lyle. So Eric admitted to doing this, and after that, Dr. Oziel called Eric and wanted Lyle to come to the office and meet him there. And during this time, he had a mistress named Judalon Smyth, and she, I think, calling her, and Judalon Smyth is Oziel's mistress, and he asked, let me take that back. He basically manipulated and coerced her into being in the office with these boys. He made her extremely fearful of the boys based on the fact that they were so dangerous, according to him, even though he doesn't really appear to be fearful of them, but he tries to make her fearful of them. So in true narcissistic fashion, and I can't diagnose, but we did go over some of the personality traits of narcissistic personality, and it does seem like Dr. Oziel may have a few. I'm just saying. I can't diagnose, but I'm just saying. So we're going to continue on with Judalon Smyth's testimony. And yeah, let's see what else she has to say about dear old Dr. Weasel. I mean Oziel, because he weaseled his way out of most of the questions when asked on cross. So here is, we're starting right at the beginning. I don't know why it already has captions, but here we go.
Smyth, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, I'll remind you that you're still under oath. You may approach.
Ms. Smyth, I want to show you exhibit number 331, which you testified about, I believe, yesterday. Is that a sort of a phone log that you compiled from your own telephone records and from Dr. Oziel's home phone telephone records?
Yes, it is.
And calling your attention to an entry for July 31st, 1989, is there an indication on this document that there was a telephone conversation from someone at Dr. Oziel's home with someone at your home?
Correct.
And does this document indicate where the call originated?
Yes, it does.
And where does it indicate the call originated?
From the Oziel home?
And do you, in fact, recall this particular phone call from Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And do you remember, now this indicates that it occurs at 10:24 at night?
Correct.
And how long a call was it?
19 minutes.
And do you remember at least part of the conversation with Dr. Oziel for those 19 minutes?
Yes, I do.
Now, do you recall when Dr. Oziel called you at that time, whether or not he told you what he had been doing up to the point when he called you?
Yes.
And what did he tell you he had been doing?
Watching a movie.
And a movie, how? A video of a movie? A television movie, what?
I believe it was a movie on television.
And did he tell you what movie it was that he was watching?
Yes, he did.
And what movie did he tell you he was watching?
It was a movie about the Billionaire Boys Club.
Thank you. I have nothing further on.
All right. Okay.
May I be seated, please?
Yes.
Okay, so that was direct with Eric's attorney, Leslie Abramson. I don't know who's next. If it's potentially Cross, might be. I think I heard Pam Bazanich speaking, so let's see what she has to say.
Ms. Smith, how did you refer to the movie? Did you call it the Billionaire Boys Club, or did you refer to it by the initials?
He called it the Billionaires Boys Club.
Thank you.
All right, did that complete the examination by the defense before the jury?
I have one brief area that I need to re-inquire about for both juries.
All right, let's get the gold jury in, and then we'll complete that, and then begin our cross-examination.
As a reminder, there are two juries, one for Eric, one for Lyle in this trial for some reason. Not sure why. That's just how they did it. In the second trial, they just had one jury for both of them.
Present with Dr. Oziel during the period after December 11th and before or on or about February 13th, 1990, when that $5,500 payment was made, where Dr. Oziel had a conversation with Lyle Menendez about paying the money.
Are you talking about the $7,000 phone call?
Yes.
Yes.
And what did you hear Dr. Oziel say in his part of that telephone conversation?
He called up Lyle, and I believe he was on the East Coast at the time, and told him that he hadn't seen any money from him and that he wanted to, be receiving some money from him. And then he said that he wasn't sure about the amount exactly, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,000 would do.
And was he demanding that or just reminding Lyle Menendez that a payment was due? What was his tone in talking about this?
He was pressuring
Is he blackmailing the boys?
him.
And to your knowledge, did this conversation occur after December 11th?
Definitely after December 11th.
Did Dr. Oziel say why that amount of money was due to him?
No, he didn't.
And to your knowledge,
I think he was blackmailing the boys and blackmailing her at the same time, because he would hold this over her head all the time and be like, well, if you don't do what I want you to do, then I'm going to call Eric and Lyle and have them come take you out. He was threatening to have her life ended if she didn't do what he wanted all the time. She was very manipulated and coerced throughout their entire patient, client, and man and mistress relationships, both of their relationships. He totally manipulated her. And you can tell by the way that she recollects her stories. And I feel like, I feel for her. I feel like it's a difficult spot to be in when you realize that this person was controlling your thoughts. Not controlling them, but they had a lot of power and influence over you, more so than you would like to admit. Been there, done that, and been in a bad relationship, bad marriage. So I get where she's kind of coming from. I feel for her.
had Dr. Oziel made appointments for Lyle Menendez which were not being kept?
Sustained.
Did Dr. Oziel express to you an intention to have a plan where he would set up phony appointments for Lyle Menendez and bill him for those appointments?
Rephrase the question.
Do you remember telling the police when you interviewed with them that you were aware of a plan that Dr. Oziel had for billing the Menendez brothers for sessions which were not being actually taking place?
Yes, I did tell the police that.
And what was your knowledge about that plan?
I learned that because Jerry Oziel told me that.
And what did he say about the plan?
That he was telling the brothers that regardless of whether they wanted to show up for therapy or have therapy or whatever, that he was, for their own good, going to make appointments for them and bill them for them so that it would look like they were in therapy, and whether they wanted to come or not was their choice.
And can you give me your best approximation of when this telephone call was made where Jerry Oziel was pressuring Lyle Menendez for money?
I was living in the house.
I think you testified.
I think it was probably around January
January of 1990.
90.
And the last question, do you know if there were any business plans in your house on October 31st with your name and address on them?
What do you mean by business plans?
Let me withdraw the question and re-answer. On October 31st, 1989, to your knowledge, was there anything in Jerry Oziel's house with your home address on it?
No.
Was there something which you gave to him and called a business plan, which was in your house, his house on October 31st, 1989?
That was not in his house on October 31st of 89.
To your knowledge, what documents were in Jerry Oziel's house that had your name on them on October 31st, 89?
A thank you card, a few cards, and one business card. A few like thank you cards and a birthday card and a few cards like that, and then my business card.
And was there a confidentiality agreement dated June 1st, 1989 that was in the house at that time?
No, that wasn't created or written at that time.
Was that confidentiality agreement created sometime in December?
Correct.
And did Jerry Oziel have you post-date that to June 1st, 1989?
He didn't choose the date. I chose the date because I felt I was being coerced into writing that document, and I wanted to be able to, if it ever came out, prove that I did not know Jerry Oziel on June 1st of '89, and therefore could not have given him a confidentiality agreement on that date.
And the agreement, which has been marked as an exhibit here, is on Dr. Oziel's business letterhead, correct?
I don't remember. I was pressured into that so quickly, and I wrote it, and it was snatched away from me that I don't remember what it looks like.
And you dated it June 1st, '89?
I did date it June 1st
And that
of
was a
'89.
time when you hadn't even met Dr. Oziel, correct?
Correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Now, Ms. Smith, Dr. Oziel's house in Sherman Oaks, where you eventually lived for a period of time, was a rather large house, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
And approximately how many square feet, if you know, would you say that house was?
I wouldn't know, but he brags that it's 6,000 square feet.
All right, and you had no reason to believe otherwise, is that correct?
Correct.
And how was it you know that there was nothing of yours, no indication of who you were in the 6,000 square foot house? Had you searched the house thoroughly before leaving in March?
No, but I know what documents that I had given him up to that point.
Your Honor, I have here an exhibit. It's Exhibit 120. I'd like to approach, please.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a package of handwriting. I'd like to ask you, first of all, the top document of Exhibit 120. Do you recognize this particular document?
Yes, I do.
And the document appears to be dated June the 15th of 1989, correct?
Correct.
Now, is this your handwriting on this document?
Correct.
Is that the correct date? In other words, did you create this document on or about June 15th, 1989?
It's the correct date.
And it indicates here, Judalon Sound and Light, Judalon Smyth Product Development, 7932.5 West 3rd Street, Los Angeles, California.
Correct.
Now, you had given this particular document to this, not only the Sound and Light card, but also the salutation in your own handwriting to Dr. Oziel during what period of time?
June 15th of
All right.
'89.
So this is a document that does, in fact, contain your name and your business address, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any personal knowledge of where Dr. Oziel kept this document after you gave it to him?
No.
Now, as long as I'm up there, I'm going to ask you about the remainder of this package. The second page appears to be a card with some handwriting. Is that your handwriting, ma'am?
Correct.
And that card is dated August the 11th of 1989. Would that have been the correct date on which you executed this?
Correct.
The second page also is the inside of a card. It appears to have handwriting. Is that your handwriting?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the date which is up here in the corner of 989, that is not your handwriting, correct?
That is not my handwriting.
But would it be fair to say that this card was given to Dr. Oziel around September of 1989, to the best of your knowledge?
No, it was not given to him at that time.
Do you recall then when this card was in fact given to him, which is the third page of Exhibit 120?
This would have been in 1990.
So the card here, that's the third page of Exhibit 120, would have been after you were already living at the Oziel home?
Correct.
And the next card, or excuse me, the next page of Exhibit 120 also appears, the words on it, if only HUDs could be put into words. There is some handwriting here. Is that your handwriting?
Correct.
Do you recall approximately what month you executed the fourth page of this exhibit?
May I read this?
Certainly.
This was in November.
Before she answers that, the question is about handwriting. And I believe the testimony from Dr. Oziel is in the handwriting on that letter is his. So could we have a
Yes.
specification of what she's talking about in terms of handwriting?
Right. There is, it looks like printing that is handwritten printing that was the interior of the card, if only HUDs could be put into words, correct?
Yeah, that's the card maker's
Right.
printing.
And then there's handwriting, and then that's yours, but up at the top there's a date of 1089, which I believe is not yours, correct?
It's Dr. Oziel's handwriting.
And so it's your recollection that this particular document, page 4 of Exhibit 120, was not executed in October of '89, but November of '89. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I don't want to go through every single one, but would it be fair to say that when there's handwriting on these cards of the nature of 1089, without a specific date, that is not your handwriting, correct?
That is correct.
And on this document here, the notation suicide note is not your handwriting,
Correct.
but the rest of the note is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's another document here dated 1189, and it says, Dearest Jerry, it appears to be on lined paper. The date of 1189 is not yours, correct?
Correct.
But the other handwriting on these 3 pages of lined paper is yours, correct?
Correct.
Now there's a document here which is called the Most Official Sex IOU, and there appears to be handwriting on this, and also a date of 11/25/89. Did you execute this particular document?
On that date?
Yes.
Correct.
And in fact, that is your handwriting of 11/25/89,
Correct.
and it seems to be witnessed by two people with paw prints. Is that correct?
2 cats.
Okay, so you actually prepared this and simulated paw prints for your 2 cats. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you in fact give this IOU to Dr. Oziel?
We were actually playing a game, and I lost the game, and this is what he requested as his winning prize.
Which was 500 sex acts, an IOU for 500 sex
Yes.
acts?
The wording actually came from Jerry Oziel. This was whoever won the game got to have whatever they wanted, and this is what he wanted. And so I wrote it and executed it at the end of the game when I lost.
All right, were you forced into executing this, or were you forced into executing it because you lost the game?
Because I lost the game.
Not because someone held your hand behind your back and twisted your arm?
Correct.
And then there is another card here. It says Happy Valentine's Day. There's a notation here in what we now know as Dr. Oziel's handwriting of 290. But that would be correct, right?
That's correct. It was the Valentine's of 90.
All right. Because you only shared one Valentine's Day with Dr. Oziel, correct?
Yes, but there were 2 Valentine's cards, and he only gave you the second Valentine's card.
All right. Was there something about the first Valentine's Day card that you think is significant?
The first Valentine's card shows that I was not very enthusiastic about the relationship or being there. The second one was my attempt to get back into his favor.
All right. Did anyone force you to write this Valentine's Day card, which is the second one, which I have here in court in Exhibit 120? Were you forced to write this?
I was frightened into writing it, yes.
And how did someone frighten you into writing this?
Oziel frightened me into writing it because he was displeased with the first Valentine's card that he received from me. So I said, well, I sent you a nicer one to your office because I was afraid that since we were opening Valentine's gifts in front of Laurel and the children, if I gave you too nice of one or something. And I was just trying to cover myself because when I displeased him, he said that there was no reason for me to be alive or to be in his life if I wasn't going to make him happy.
But you also didn't want him opening a mushy Valentine's Day card from you in front of his wife, right?
Oh, Laurel and I talked about sex with Oziel quite often, so there wouldn't have been a problem with a mushy card in front of Laurel.
Okay. This last document, which appears to be printing, which is different from the writing in the other documents in 120, did you in fact write this particular 2-page document?
Let me see.
So she and Laurel both talked about sex with Oziel right in front of each other? Is that what I just heard?
Of his wife, right?
Oh, Laurel and I talked about sex with Oziel quite often, so there wouldn't have been a problem with a mushy card in front of Laurel.
Okay. This last document, which appears to be printing, which is different from the writing in the other documents in 120, did you in fact write this particular 2-page document?
Let me see. Correct.
Do you remember approximately when you wrote it? It says here, it looks like 280 or 90, which is Dr. Oziel's handwriting, but do you remember when it was? The ending is love and zillions of kisses.
It was after I was in the house.
Now, during the period of time that you've been aware of this particular case, have you made statements to other people about what you know about the Menendez case? All right, I agree.
All right.
Ms. Smith, you have talked to a number of people, starting with the police, about the Menendez case. Is that correct?
I think that it's still vague as to what is meant by the Menendez case.
All right, that's an objection?
Yes.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
Ms. Smith, I believe you indicated in your direct testimony that on the 5th of March of 1990, you went to the police department and had a conversation with Detective Zoller and a friend of yours who is a commissioner whose first name is Murray, correct?
Correct.
Since that time, you have given a number of statements about what you know about the Menendez case, both to the police, to the court, and to the press. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I believe that the following day, on the 6th of March of 1990, that you participated in what you knew to be a tape-recorded conversation with police detectives from the Beverly Hills Police Department and a deputy district attorney named Elliot Al-Hadif, correct?
Correct.
And you knew that was being tape-recorded?
Correct.
And that was for approximately 6 or 7 hours on that date. Is that correct?
I believe so, about 7 hours.
Now, in addition to talking to the police on those 2 occasions, I believe you've indicated that you also spoke to someone from Primetime Live, which is a television show aired, I believe, on Channel 7. Is that correct? On ABC?
Correct.
When was the first time you spoke to anyone from Primetime Live, if you recall?
When was the airing of their first?
So they're going to try to make her look like a clout chaser because she spoke to the media about Dr. Oziel.
Show May
Well,
something, right? May 17th, I believe.
So that was May of 1990, is that correct?
Correct.
And during that...
And Diane Sawyer approached me. She came into my store, I believe, the day before or 2 days before the airing of that show.
So that would have been around the 15th of May of 1990 that you had your first contact with anyone from Primetime Live, correct?
Correct.
And then there was another show which was aired on August the 30th of 1990 in which you are seen speaking during the show. Do you recall that particular broadcast?
Yes.
All right. And when you talked to Diane Sawyer, did you tell her the truth?
Yes.
Now, at the time that you spoke with her, you weren't under oath, right?
No.
Were you making any attempt to try to fool her or be deceptive with her?
No.
In addition to talking to her in a broadcast which was aired in August of 1990, did you have any other conversations with Diane Sawyer regarding either the Menendez case or your relationship with Dr. Oziel?
I'm sorry, what is the time frame that you're...
After the second show was aired on August the 30th of 1990, were there any further shows on Primetime Live which featured you, to the best of your knowledge?
I believe they've taken the interview that I've given and they've aired more than one show.
What was your motivation in talking to Primetime Live?
At the time that Diane Sawyer came into my store, Oziel had started trying to extort money from me, And when I spoke to the district attorney who was handling it at that time, Al Hadaf, all of a sudden, where before he had said that they were going to take care of me and protect me and do all these things, all of a sudden it was like, well, how do we know this? And I was sort of abandoned and left to fend for myself against Oziel. And so I was very afraid that Oziel was going to kill me, and that now the police and the district attorney's office had, gotten whatever they had needed from me, so they certainly weren't interested in keeping me alive. And I felt like I needed to have some public awareness of the danger that I was in to try to distance Oziel from me, because regardless of, Elliot Al Hadaf did tell me that he had called Oziel's lawyer and told him to stay away from me.
Oh, excuse me.
I think this is, yeah, but this is hearsay.
Well, it's responsive. She asked her why.
Okay, let's ask another question.
Okay. Ms. Smith, would it be fair to say that when
I don't think the prosecutor wanted that answer. It doesn't help her at all. But I feel she's honest. I don't, compared to Oziel versus her, who do you think's more reliable versus or regarding their testimony? I mean, come on.
when you went to the police on March the 5th of 1990, your primary motivation is that you wanted Dr. Oziel prosecuted.
Correct. He was the one who committed crimes against me, not Lyle or Eric Menendez.
All right, so your main motivation was that you wanted the police and the district attorney's office to arrest Dr. Oziel and to prosecute him, correct?
Yes, for crimes, legitimate crimes committed against me.
And you were very disappointed when the district attorney's office failed to do that, correct?
I am very upset that the law seems to decide who they will prosecute and who they won't prosecute. I thought that the law was supposed to protect all innocent people.
And you've been very unhappy with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office because of what you...
That was like a media's news clip dream, like to just take that little section of what she said, because she's speaking for herself and she's speaking for the boys. She's talking about actual real justice and who should be in prison and who maybe was a victim of their circumstances.
Seems to decide who they will prosecute and who they won't prosecute. I thought that the law was supposed to protect all innocent people.
And you've been very unhappy with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office because of what you perceive to be the failure of the district attorney's office to prosecute Dr. Oziel, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, when you went to and talked to Diane Sawyer then, one of your motivations, well, what was your motivation? Was it solely to protect you from Dr. Oziel?
Correct.
And I believe you indicated that you sued Dr. Oziel. Were you motivated by a desire to be protected and suing him for money?
I was not interested in the money. Lawyers are the ones who are interested in the money. I was interested in proving that I was telling the truth, that Dr. Oziel was a liar, and that I had been terribly victimized and had real criminal charges, criminal acts committed against me that no one was paying any attention to because they wanted to whitewash him and make him look like a good person when he was not.
Now, were you given any reasons from the district attorney's office as to why they wouldn't prosecute Dr. Oziel?
Yes, because they needed him as a witness.
No, Ms. Smith, weren't you told by the district attorney's office that it would be...
Oh, they wouldn't prosecute him because they needed him as a witness in this case against Eric and Lyle. Holy crap, she just said that.
And that I had been terribly victimized and had real criminal charges, criminal acts committed against me that no one was paying any attention to because they wanted to whitewash him and make him look like a good person when he was not.
Now, were you given any reasons from the district attorney's office as to why they wouldn't prosecute Dr. Oziel?
Yes, because they needed him as a witness.
No, Ms. Smith, weren't you told by the district attorney's office that it would be difficult to prove?
Objection argumentative.
Rephrase it.
Were you ever told by the district attorney's office that it would be difficult to prove a rape allegation that you wanted to have brought against Dr. Oziel? Were you told that? That it would be your word against his?
The one thing that stands out in my mind was about giving him immunity for any crimes. If they had to give him immunity, they would.
You understand Dr. Oziel was not given immunity in this case. Do you understand that?
And we both know why.
No, Ms. Smith, we don't both know why. Isn't it true?
That's not argument, that's
Okay.
not argument.
Ms. Smith, you were very upset with the district attorney's office because the district attorney's office did not file rape charges against Dr. Oziel, correct?
There were more than rape charges.
But my question is, you were very upset with the district attorney's office because we would not file rape charges against Dr. Oziel, correct?
There were many more than just rape charges.
Can you answer the question?
Objection, Your Honor, to the form of the question.
Overruled.
Were you or were you not unhappy with the district attorney's office because we would not file rape charges against Dr. Oziel? Yes or no? Were you or weren't you?
That question is not answerable that way.
Overruled. You understand the question?
I can't answer it the way that she's asking it because there is no yes or no to that.
Okay, I'll ask it again. Ms. Smith, you were upset with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office because we would not file rape charges against Dr. Oziel.
Objection, Your Honor, the witness has already indicated you cannot answer that question.
Overruled.
My being upset is not because they wouldn't file those charges. My being
I feel like we're in a loop. Maybe a time warp. I don't know.
Cannot answer that question.
Overruled.
My being upset is not because they wouldn't file those charges. My being upset is because all the behind-the-scene things around that. It's not because you didn't file those particular charges. It's all the other things that went on behind that.
Now, in addition to talking to Diane Sawyer, did you give an interview to a writer named Dominic Dunn?
Correct.
And did you read the article that was published in Vanity Fair in October of 1990, written by Dominic Dunn?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Not at this point. You can answer the question. Did you read it or not?
Yes.
Did you find that in any of the direct quotes from you in the article that Mr. Dunn had misquoted you?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this unless people are in a position to collaterally prove what they're seeking here.
Overruled.
Yes, there were a few inaccuracies, which I believe right after the article came out that I made a list of those and sent them to him.
Do you have a copy of the list that you made?
I may, I'm not sure, but if you went through everything, I could tell you.
All right, well, we will get to that in a moment then. In addition to talking to Diane Sawyer, now how many times did you talk to Diane Sawyer?
Diane Sawyer herself?
Yes, about the subject matter. In other words, how many times did you talk to her about something substantive rather than scheduling or something else?
In
Your Honor,
person?
I'm going to object to this today. I don't think that yes, that's
Overruled.
Do you understand what I mean by the term substantive?
Are you talking about in person or?
Or over the phone?
I talked with Diane twice in person. And are you talking about communications that we've had strictly in relationship to Menendez or Oziel? Or are you asking like if she had just called to ask me if I was feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm not talking about if she called to ask you if you were feeling okay. I'm talking about if you had any conversations with her which dealt with the gist of
Just
Mr.
twice.
Right.
That I recall.
Now, in addition to talking to Diane Sawyer and Mr. Dunn, you also filled out an affidavit which you signed for the purposes of having it filed in court, correct?
I'm going to object to the form of the question. This states the other.
Overruled.
Could you ask that question again? I'm not sure what.
Certainly.
Yes.
May I approach, please, Your Honor, and show her the affidavit?
Yes.
I'm going to show you an exhibit, which has been marked as Exhibit 345. I'd like to ask you this time if you recognize the document.
Yes.
Could you tell the jury what that document is?
It says that it's an affidavit.
Now, on this particular document, it appears to have a stamp that says filed July, well, it's hard to tell. Let me look at the date of the back.
I think it's July 31st.
All right. It appears, though, that the document was signed by you on June the 8th of 1990. Would that be correct that you signed this document on June the 8th, 1990?
Yes.
Now, I believe you've indicated that there was some difficulty in your mind in the preparation of this affidavit. Is that correct?
Yes, there was problems with it.
Now, how many times was it presented to you for corrections before this last version was signed by you?
I signed it on the 4th version. I
And-
believe it was 3 times before that I sent it back.
And when you sent it back, did you make corrections which were then incorporated into the next typed version?
Yes, and then the new version would come back with new mistakes.
And finally, at the end, Detective Zola brought you this last one, correct?
I don't believe so. I believe it was Elliot Al-Hadaf.
But at some point, you were brought this final version. It appears just looking at page 1 that there are 4 sentences that are crossed out just on the first page,
Your Honor, I'm
correct?
going to check. I think the question is
Okay, I will restate it.
Right.
Ms. Smith, when this last document was brought to you, you made corrections on it using handwriting and ink, correct?
Yes, I began making corrections.
It appears that at page 1, you crossed out 4 lines. Is that what you did?
Yes.
Page 2, it appears at the first line here that there's the initial JS. Were those your initials that you placed there?
Correct.
And then there's some printing that says contacted Lyle and Eric to offer help and. Did you place
Correct.
that printing there?
Correct.
On page 3, there appears to be a correction at line 20 of the spelling of a man named Hardaway. Did you make that correction of the spelling there?
No, I didn't.
At page 12, Your Honor, may I have a
You're
moment?
getting this right. Do you want?
We're going to have a break and wait for this.
I'm sorry? Sure. I'm sorry? Is it desperation break?
Your Honor, I think
Okay.
you do want to exactly here.
Okay, we'll take a recess, and we'll make this our morning recess, and we'll resume. We have 15 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We have 15 minutes, too.
Yes, Your Honor. The exhibit which is 345, which is a copy of the affidavit, is not the same as the original. The original has more corrections on it than are contained on this exhibit. So I was wondering if we could substitute the original, 345.
Well, 345 was the document shown to us by Ms. McCurd.
Correct.
So that is her testimony, and she testified in relationship to it. There's another document that is different than
right, I'd like to mark-
you would mark that as a separate exhibit.
Now, the court need a copy. Court is 345. No, not precisely correct. Where's the court?
I don't know if I need it at all.
All right. Well, if the court does, I'll just place it.
I just had it because it's a document filed with the court.
All right.
Audio is terrible.
Use the copy that I had in my file, which I received from Mr. Chiniak, which was file stamped, but there are some differences. I have no objection to her substitution. One exhibit for the other.
Well, the only thing is that she might have testified a certain way, and I really have no way of knowing if it was fitting to the one exhibit versus the other. That was the original was the affidavit that was contained in the file, in the box of documents transferred to this court from the Santa Monica branch, along with all the transcripts, tapes, and all those things.
No, there's one, 341, he has to have this on it. Well, this doesn't.
Getting bored.
It'll be 351, yeah. Anything else, then?
Yes, Your Honor. It was reported to us during the break that there is an individual who's sitting in the district attorney's row who has been reacting visibly during Ms. Smith's testimony. I'm concerned. I didn't observe this myself. The two separate people reported it to me. We're concerned because our jury, the blue jury, is sitting right next to them.
I did not see that either. Who is it, or who?
The person was identified as a woman wearing white.
There was nobody wearing white, per se.
Yes, there's a woman wearing light clothing.
A white blouse and a gray coat. Is that the person you think?
Yes, that's the person, I believe.
Okay, well, I did not see anything, quite frankly. But anybody who is in the audience is ordered not to react in any fashion whatsoever to the testimony or other events that are ongoing here in the trial if you can't conform to that.
I like that they called them out in front of everybody there so that the whole room could look at them and be like, oh, it's her. Describe their outfit, point, laugh.
That order, you will be removed from the courtroom. Everyone understand that? All right, then let's proceed. The jurors are all back. You may continue your cross-examination.
May I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Smith, I have a document, the market signature one. Do you recognize this particular document as being the original affidavit that you signed on June the 8th of 1990?
Yes, I don't know if it's the original that I signed, but the signature and the initials are mine.
Right, and if you look at this document on the last page, which is page 22, it does appear, does it not, that this is not a reproduction, but in fact this is the actual ink that you put on this paper.
It appears that way.
Now, when you filled out this document and finally signed it on June the 8th, you also made some corrections to it, and I think we were discussing those before the break. On page 1, there are 4 lines which are lined out, and I believe you testified that was done by yourself.
I think so, although it's not initialed by me.
And on the second page, at the top in the first line, there's some cross out, there's some printing, and the initial JS.
Correct.
And then the second whole paragraph is crossed out with an X. Did you place that X there too?
I don't recall. It's not initialed by me, but it is crossed out.
On page 3, there appears to be a correction to the spelling of the name Hardaway and the initials JS next to it. Did you place those initials there?
Those are my initials. Looking at it, I don't recall making that correction.
Well, you have no reason to believe that anyone made those initials there aside from yourself.
No, I'm sure I must have.
On page 12 of this document.
Don't be so sure. Sometimes things get fudged in an investigation.
It appears that there is a correction to change the word cars in the plural. The S is crossed off, and then there's the initials JS there. Are those your initials?
Yes.
Is that the way you make your initials?
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 14, there appears to be another typographical correction. Instead of saying on therapy, it says in therapy, and there's a handwritten I and the initials JS. Is that the kind of correction that you would be in the habit and custom of making? In other words, are you the kind of person who would correct a typographical error?
I don't know if I'm that kind of person or not.
Do you recall placing initials on this document before you signed it on June the 8th?
I don't recall it.
Are those your initials?
Those are my initials.
And that's the way you make your initials, correct?
Correct.
In uppercase like that, correct?
Correct.
And this is your signature on the last page of Exhibit 351, correct?
That's correct.
And it indicates here right above your signature, I certify or declare under penalty of perjury as provided in Section 2015.5 Code of Civil Procedure that the foregoing facts are true and correct.
Correct.
Was that statement there when you signed the document on June the 8th?
Yes.
Okay. And did you understand that when you signed this document, you were in fact signing it under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
In addition to the facts stated in this particular affidavit, there was also an occasion when you testified in a courtroom. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I believe you indicated yesterday that at the conclusion of your testimony, you were told not to discuss your testimony during that hearing with either the district attorney or the police.
Correct.
Did you follow the judge's admonition? Did you follow what the judge told you and not discuss this with either the prosecution or the police?
Correct. I did not discuss my testimony, but I did say something to them when I came out of the court to tell them that I had disappeared in the courtroom and I didn't really know what was said or done. And that I would like to talk to them about it as soon as the judge said that I was able to. I wanted them to let me know so I could talk to them about it.
But you never did that, did you?
I was never notified that that was allowed. So no, we've never discussed it. And I still have no memory of that testimony.
This is her referring to, in part 1, she referred to her testimony as like she was disassociating during the testimony. She didn't really remember what she even said, or she was so nervous and it felt like an out of body experience, like she wasn't there. She's saying right now she has no memory of the testimony, so she disassociated quite a bit.
Now, in preparing for your testimony today, you did so with the aid of the defense attorneys, is that correct?
What do you term as aid?
Well, did you talk to the defense attorneys before you testified here?
Yes.
And when's the first time you met with the defense attorneys in 1993? if you recall?
I would have to look through my appointment book
On how many occasions have you met with the defense attorneys in this case in 1993?
a few times.
And were any of those for longer than an hour?
Possibly.
Have you spoken with the defense attorneys between your testimony yesterday and your testimony today?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, during this last break, you were speaking with the defense attorneys, weren't you?
Yes.
And in order to prepare yourself for testifying, did you review any written documentation, any transcripts, anything that would help you refresh your memory in order to prepare yourself to testify?
Correct.
What have you looked at?
I looked at the transcript of my 7-hour interview with the police.
Did you look at the affidavit, which I've just shown you, Exhibit 351?
I did not look at that.
Did you look at any testimony that you gave, or did you look at any testimony that you gave?
I did not look at any testimony that I previously gave.
Did you discuss any of your previous testimony with any of the defense attorneys before you testified here on Friday?
Yes.
Now, when you testified, that was in Santa Monica on July the 30th and July the 31st of 1990, correct?
Yes.
And when you testified, did you have to raise your hand and swear an oath to tell the truth?
Yes.
And when you testified in July of 1990, did you understand that you were testifying under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
And when you testified, did you tell the truth?
Yes, I told the truth as I believed it and knew it at the time.
Would you say your memory today, 4 years later, is better than your memory was in July of 1990?
In some aspects, yes, because I now have my own memory, not the memory Oziel planted in me.
When you testified in front of Judge Albrecht in Santa Monica, did you tell him that you were testifying?
That is a great answer because not too many people can actually pull that kind of answer off either, that your memory is better today than it was yesterday. Because when you are being ABUSE'd, you don't have control over your thoughts sometimes. It's so chaotic in your brain because they've done a number on you that you can disassociate and not even know where you are for hours at a time if you choose to, because it's too painful or too difficult, or just you don't even mean to, you're just numb because you don't want to feel the emotions anymore. You don't want to feel the hurt and betrayal from that person anymore.
From a memory which had been implanted in you by someone else?
At the time of that testimony, I was not in therapy yet. I had not been diagnosed. I was actually in denial. I believed I was perfectly fine, that nothing was wrong with me. It was my appearance in that courtroom and my inability to know what went on. The disassociation that happened frightened me, and as a result of that, I then agreed to go into therapy.
When you refer to disassociation, what are you talking about?
Apparently, what I've learned about that incident was when I came into what I perceived as a hostile environment and something that was part of the initial trauma that I had suffered, which was coming and being in the room with the Menendez brothers, I did something which is called disassociating, where I somehow separated myself. And I was there and I answered questions from some element of my consciousness, but
you weren't really there?
I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not really the person to ask to explain to you what happened. I'm just the victim.
Ms. Smyth, when you testified then in front of Judge Albrecht, would it be your testimony then that you were in a dissociative state? Is that correct? And you didn't really know what you were doing. Would that be fair to say?
Correct.
And when you filled out the affidavit, the 4 drafts you made of the affidavit, were you disassociating during those 4 drafts?
I'm not conscious that I was doing that, but I was suffering at that time. I still had no treatment for the things that I was later diagnosed.
Yeah, and Oziel was still a big influence in her thoughts. So she doesn't know she couldn't decipher what her own thoughts were versus what Oziel had been telling her to feel and think and believe.
With, which are the same kind of traumas and disorders and syndromes that people who are prisoners of war are diagnosed with and come back with.
Were you dissociating when you talked to Diane Sawyer about what you had heard in Dr. Oziel's office?
I'm not aware or qualified to say that.
Now, Ms. Smyth.
All I can say is that I still at that time had not been diagnosed or gone into treatment. I was operating on the basis that I believed I was perfectly fine and normal.
Ms. Smyth, when you talked to Diane Sawyer, have you seen a videotape of your talk with Diane Sawyer that was aired on August the 30th of 1990? Have you seen that subsequent to it actually airing?
I don't think so.
Okay. Are you aware of the fact that you told Diane Sawyer the following things? She asked you in the program which was aired on August the 30th of 1990, are Lyle and Eric Menendez guilty? Did they murder their parents? Your answer, yes, they did. Diane Sawyer, you know this. You answered, absolutely. I heard from their own mouths that they killed their parents. It then goes on and she asks you, they were proud of it. They were proud of how they carried it off. Your answer, absolutely. They felt that they had committed the perfect crime. Do you remember telling Diane Sawyer that particular information?
Yes.
And further on in the program, do you remember saying, one of the things that I heard Lyle say that was really disturbing to me, this is the sum of, or the essence of what he had said. Well, for once my father would have to congratulate me and give me credit that I planned the perfect murder. I carried out the perfect murder. Do you remember telling Diane Sawyer that?
Yes.
And do you remember telling Diane Sawyer that you heard Lyle say that?
Yes.
Right, so you did in fact tell her that information.
Yes.
And I take it as your testimony now that you really didn't hear that.
At the time that I made that statement, and up until very recently, I did believe that I heard that.
Now, I believe you indicated on direct examination that on October the 31st of 1989, you heard Lyle Menendez come into the office and say threatening things to his brother Eric, correct?
Correct.
And I believe it's now your testimony that you did not hear Lyle Menendez threaten Dr. Oziel, correct?
I didn't. I mean, I heard him say, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel," and Dr. Oziel convinced me that was a threat.
Well, Ms. Smyth, my question is what you overheard that was said in the office, not what you actually saw, but what you overheard in the office. You indicated that you indicated on direct examination that you heard Lyle Menendez yell at his brother and say something to the effect of, "I could kill you for what you've done," but you now say you didn't hear him threaten Dr. Oziel or anyone associated with him, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, did you tell Diane Sawyer he threatened his brother and he was angry because he felt like now he was presented with having to kill more people because his brother couldn't keep his mouth shut? Do you remember telling that to Diane Sawyer?
Yes.
Now, in addition to talking to Diane Sawyer about things that you say you heard, you also, did you not, put in the affidavit that you heard particular information, correct?
Everything I told Diane Sawyer, I did not represent to her that I heard those things directly.
No, Ms. Smyth, my question then is regarding the things.
Yes, this is all hearsay and speculation that she was talking to with Diane Sawyer, which she just quoted. So you can't use anything that she says as fact because it's hearsay and on media. I don't know.
I just read to you where you say, I heard Lyle Menendez say that he was going to have to kill other people. You indicated that you heard that on Prime Time Live on August the 30th of 1990.
Yes, and I did believe that.
Okay, so now you're saying that you no longer believe that you heard that, correct?
I was brainwashed.
You were brainwashed?
I was told over and over, Judalon, this is what you heard. Just like I was told over and over, Judalon, you tried to commit suicide. There's proof that you tried to commit suicide on your medical records. Just look at them. And when you look at the Reddit medical records, it says, written out by the doctor, not suicidal.
Ms. Smyth, did you ever stage a phony suicide attempt at your home so that Dr. Oziel would find you?
Yes.
And would you tell the jury what you did?
Well, first you have to understand that for Jerry Oziel, love equals suicide.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd like to strike her comment and ask her to answer the question.
I cannot answer the question without telling you why.
The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
Ms. Smyth, just tell us physically what you did. Well, let me just ask you this. You opened up your oven, correct? At your home, in this, when you wanted it to look like you were going to commit suicide, correct?
Yes.
And what other physical things did you do to make it look
I
like?
opened the oven, but it was never turned on.
And what other things did you do? Did you lie down on the floor?
Correct.
Did you pretend to be passed out?
Correct.
And did you want Dr. Oziel to find you in that situation?
Dr. Oziel wanted to find me in that position.
Well, did he tell you beforehand, hey, Judalon, it might be fun if you pretended to commit suicide and I'll come in and rescue you? Is that
Not in
what
those
happened?
words, but yes, he did.
Oh, so he told you to do that?
Correct.
Now, he
What kind of sick mind does that? Like, why would he want that? Ay, ay, ay. He wants to be the hero. He's got a God complex. He's got to be the hero. Like with the boys, he was saying in part one, according to Judalon, that Dr. Oziel was saying that he was going to help the boys out financially and help them make business decisions and things like that. It's like, who are you to make any of those things happen? Like, who are you to be their like confidant? Now, all of a sudden, you were treating Eric for therapy reasons, and by the way, he's a sex therapist with some awards or something in like phobia, some specialization in phobia. I don't know what that has to do with a teenage boy, but there's that.
He was very concerned after he found you, correct?
No, he was very elated and thrilled that I had now finally demonstrated that I had learned what true love was.
Okay, so during the course of your relationship with Dr. Oziel, I take it would be your testimony that you were the one who was perfectly sane and it was Dr. Oziel who was misbehaving, correct?
I think it was very unhealthy on my part to be involved and participate and be manipulated into the things that I was manipulated into.
Now, Ms. Smyth, when you testified in front of Judge Albrecht on July the 30th of 1990, the defendants were present, is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Do you remember Judge Albrecht asking you the following questions and you giving the following answers? Does counsel want a reference? Okay, page...
She just told you she disassociated throughout her entire testimony, so I don't know how her testimony, I mean, I guess it's up to the jury to decide whether she's credible or not, and as to whether they would believe that she disassociated or not. So I guess it can come in, but she just told you on the stand that she disassociated.
The 30th. I think it's page 40. What's the first day? Right there. What's the second page? Next page. All right, it's page 60. Court. At some point, did you learn of there allegedly being threats from the Menendez brothers to Dr. Oziel? And your answer, the legal terms are kind of hard for me. Question, did you learn that? You acquired that knowledge. Your answer was yes. Question, what was the source of that knowledge? Answer, I directly heard them make the threats. Question, do you recall the date on which you first heard such a threat? Answer, the night of October 31st, 1989. Question, and where did that occur? Answer, at 435 North Bedford, the offices of Jerry Oziel. Question, and at whom were those threats directed? Answer, to Jerry Oziel. Question, and could you tell who was making the threats? Answer, yes. Question, did you see them made? Answer, in one case, no, because it was through the door. In the second case, yes. Question, which occurred first, the one you heard through the door or the one you observed? Your answer, the one through the door. Question, what was inside the door from whence you heard the threat emit? Answer, you mean what was being said? Question by the judge. What was in the room? What room was that? Answer, it's Jerry's office. I'm going to stop here for a moment. Does this sound familiar to you?
It sounds accurate based on my recollections of that time.
Now, you testified yesterday that you, in fact, were in the offices of Dr. Oziel on October the 31st, 1989, correct?
I was there October 31st.
All right, and this says as well, back in July of 90, you were saying that you were in the office. So that's exactly what you said yesterday, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Then it goes on at line 24, question by the judge. Where were you when you could hear the threats? Answer, on the other side of the door of the office. Question, in terms of feet, is there some distance in here that you can tell us that might have separated you from the person who heard the threats? And then it goes on, and it appears to be 7 or 8 feet. Question at line 8, page 62. Quite close, answer by you, yes. Question by the judge. All that separated you from that person was the door. Answer, yes. Question, could you hear clearly through there? Answer, yes. Question by the judge. Could you hear people in the other room if they were talking in a normal tone of voice? Answer, from the other side of the door, yes. Line 24. Question by the judge. Could you tell who made the first threat? Answer, yes. Question, by what means could you tell? You answered, the context of the conversation. Now, when you told Judge Albrecht that information, were you telling him the truth?
Yes.
Question. Do you want to tell me a little more about that, how you arrived at the conclusion? Answer, well, because Lyle was angry at Eric for coming to tell Jerry about his parents. He yelled and he said he didn't have a brother anymore. He could kill him. Look at all the trouble he caused, and now we have to kill Oziel and everybody connected to Oziel and everybody that knew him. Now, was that answer incorrect?
That answer was correct, but part of it was what I heard, and the other part is what Jerry Oziel then said was the rest of it. And so I always operated on the assumption that that was all true.
Now, when you talked to the police in March the 6th on tape, you were asked specifically by the police to tell them what you'd heard versus what you had been told, correct?
Incorrect.
Well, do you remember a portion of the transcript wherein you said...
Objection, I'd like a citation to the transcript.
Okay, just a moment. I need to find it. I'll go on to something else. I have it marked in my notes later. Ms. Smyth, referring now, again to page, I think it's 63, line 13. Question by Judge Albrecht. Later you observed a situation wherein another threat was uttered. Yes. Where did that occur? Your answer, out at the elevator. Who made the threat there? That was...
I'm going to object to this as no foundation.
Question, who made the threat there? Answer, that was Lyle and Jerry. Question, out of the elevator? Answer, because Eric had run out earlier and went down the stairs. Now, you testified, I believe, in this courtroom that you actually saw Eric Menendez leave the October 31st session and run down the stairs.
Yes, and that's true. I did see Eric leave and run down the stairs.
All right. And so, of the things that I've read to you so far, the only thing that you dispute that you actually heard is Lyle Menendez threatening to kill Dr. Oziel and people associated with him. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Your Honor, I'm going to approach and give Ms. Smyth a copy of the affidavit 351 so she can follow my questions. I'm giving you now to the 351. I'd like to refer you to page 6 of the affidavit. Starting at line 2, do you see the sentence that starts with the word while in the hallway?
Correct.
Okay, Your Honor, at this time I'm going to read from page 6, starting at line 2 of the affidavit. While in the hallway, I heard Lyle's screams coming from Dr. Oziel's office. Then, in quotes and underlined, is the following, starting at line 5. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you told him. I don't even have a brother now. I could get rid of you for this. Now I hope you know what we are going to have to do. I hope you realize what we are going to have to do. We've got to kill him and anyone associated with him who knows that we are associated to him. Then, at line 13, it says, not in quotes, Eric responded, sobbing, in quotes, the following occurs. I can't kill anymore. Anyone else, I can't kill anymore. Underline now, and still in quotes, it says, I can't stop you from what you have to do, but I can't kill anymore. End of quotes. Now, you signed this affidavit under penalty of perjury, correct?
Correct.
You made corrections to this affidavit. In fact, the last correction appears to be on page 14, correct?
I'm not sure what page, but you're saying 14?
And
I believe you.
And I am reading to you, am I not, from page 6 of this affidavit, correct?
Correct.
So, is it now your testimony that you didn't actually hear that?
I heard a portion of this. And actually, there's a sentence missing from here, which the last thing that I actually heard was, I could kill you for this. And then Eric started really crying, and Lyle did continue talking, but I couldn't really tell what he was saying. And I think then Oziel interrupted. And then the next thing that I heard was, and it wasn't, I can't stop you, it was something about what do you want to do, or what are you going to do, or something like that. And I got the rest of these words and sentences from Jerry Oziel, but they had been told to me over and over and over so many times that I believed that that's what they were, and I believed that since I heard the beginning of it, that it was the full statement. I had no reason to distrust Oziel at that time.
Now, referring to page 7, starting at line 2 of the affidavit, would you go on to the next page, please? I believe you indicated yesterday that when you saw Lyle Menendez say, good luck, Dr. Oziel, at the elevator, that in your own mind you felt that that was not threatening, that you didn't find anything particularly threatening about it. It was only later that you were convinced by Dr. Oziel that that was the threat. Is that your testimony?
Correct.
Now, at page 7, starting at line 2, would you please follow? In your affidavit, it says, I overheard Dr. Oziel say to Lyle that he needed to talk to them some more. They needed him. They're safe with him. Eric needs him. He can't handle this by himself. And that they needed to understand confidentiality. Lyle responded, quote, I can understand Eric, but he shouldn't have done this, and now he's made more trouble, and we have to take care of this, end quote. Is that what you heard?
Yes.
So this affidavit is correct insofar as I've just read on page 7.
I'm going to object to that.
No,
Argumentative, performing question.
Okay. Well, Ms. Smyth, did you in fact hear Lyle Menendez say the quote that I just read to the jury?
well, to this effect, he was saying to Dr. Oziel that he understood about Eric, and this sounds and seems close to what he said, but as whether it's really exactly what he said, I would have to really spend a lot of time going back over that and thinking about it. But it's generally the idea what he said. He seemed to be concerned about his brother. He wanted to, it seemed like he wanted to get out of there.
Well, do you remember some sort of words uttered by Lyle Menendez which expressed the sentiments of now he's made more trouble and we have to take care of this? In other words, did you hear any words uttered by Lyle Menendez indicating that now there was a problem or that there was something wrong that had to be solved?
Yes, he was very concerned about his brother. He wanted to go to attend to his brother, and Dr. Oziel wanted him to stay there and wanted him to bring his brother back in.
At line 14 on page 7, the next sentence appears.
Because he didn't have enough blackmail on the tape yet. That's why he wanted his brother to come back in.
Dr. Oziel then fearfully asked, and then in quotes, are you threatening me? Is this a direct threat? Now, when you were presented with the affidavit, was this particular sentence in here, Dr. Oziel then fearfully asked?
I suppose it was, but fearfully was not my characterization. I don't know if in the 7-hour interview I said that he fearfully asked. He did ask, and Jerry Oziel often says to people over very innocent things, are you threatening me? Is this a direct threat? I can't tell you the number of times he's said that to me.
I take it that one of your motivations for testifying is that you would like to discredit Dr. Oziel further. Is that correct?
I did not have any motivation in testifying. I did not want to be here. I made a specific request not to be here.
But you're here, correct?
I was subpoenaed. I asked my attorney, and he said that I had to appear because I was subpoenaed.
And you're aware of the fact that this particular trial is being televised nationally, correct? Are you aware of that?
Correct.
And are you aware of the fact that Primetime Live was televised nationally?
Yes.
And when you went to Primetime Live, you wanted them to help you to discredit or protect you from Dr. Oziel, correct? When you agreed to be interviewed on camera by Primetime Live, one of your motivations was that you wanted some sort of protection from Dr. Oziel, correct?
I wanted some public knowledge that Oziel intended to kill me so that when I showed up dead, they would know where to look.
Now, you no longer believe that Dr. Oziel intends to kill you, do you?
I do believe that he intends to kill me. I was very concerned about coming to this court because he would have knowledge that I would be here, and I've made sure that I have people around me at all times.
Ms. Smith,
I've given up my right to vote to protect myself so that Oziel cannot find me. You don't know the lengths that I've gone through to protect my whereabouts from Dr. Oziel. Oziel most recently attacked me as of October
Excuse me, Your Honor,
26th.
could the witness be asked not to volunteer this information? Ms. Smith, you want to discredit Dr. Oziel. That's what you want to do, right?
I don't have any need to discredit Dr. Oziel. Dr. Oziel is a discredit.
Okay, and it is your desire, is it not, to discredit Dr. Oziel by your
It is my
testimony?
desire to set the record straight and to tell the truth.
Okay. So when you told Judge Albrecht that you
That was a great answer. I don't have to discredit him. He's already done it to himself. Oh, that was beautiful.
heard these threats, when you signed in your affidavits that you heard these threats, it was not your desire to tell the truth?
Yes, it was my desire to tell the truth. It has always been my desire.
Now, after you heard Dr. Oziel ask Lyle Menendez, are you threatening me? Is this a direct threat? The affidavit goes on page 7 at line 20 and says, there was a deliberate pause, and Lyle looked at him, reached for and picked up Dr. Oziel's hand, shook his hand, and said, good luck, Dr. Oziel. Now, did you, in fact, tell the police that when you had this affidavit filled out?
Yeah, I'm objecting to the form of the question. It's confusing. Pulling up, signing in.
I'll rephrase the question. Ms. Smith, did those particular things actually happen? In other words, did Lyle Menendez pick up Dr. Oziel's hand, shake it, and say, good luck, Dr. Oziel?
The activity happened. I'm not sure that these adjectives are mine, or that these adjectives can be found in the 7 hours of interview with the police.
Ms. Smith, at page 14, I'd like you to jump ahead to page 14 and look at line 19 there.
One moment here.
Do you have that page?
Yes.
14, line 19.
Yes. Do you see there's a correction from in therapy, excuse me, to on therapy to in therapy, and then there's your initial correcting that typographical error. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Was there a reason back on page 7, that you didn't change the adjectives fearfully in order to more accurately reflect what your state of mind was?
Is it misspelled? I mean, I don't. What are you getting at? Is it
Well-
misspelled or something? I mean, did I miss a comma or a period, or what are you talking about?
You were concerned about the content of this particular document, isn't that true?
Adjectives and punctuation and misspelling are different things.
So you were more concerned with the punctuation than the content, is that what you're telling us?
I don't know what I was concerned or thinking of at the time. I was quite traumatized.
You were very traumatized. Did Mr. Al-Hadif traumatize you?
I was completely traumatized and suffering from trauma from the point that I escaped the Oziel home, and up until I actually went into therapy in the fall of '90, I had a lot of problems and exhibited a lot of odd and strange behaviors, and it took a great deal of time before people said, oh, the Judalon that we know is starting to come back. I was not myself for quite some time.
Are you yourself now?
Well, with the recent re-trauma that I was put through on the 26th, I've had some setbacks and a lot of flashbacks and problems, but I am much more myself and, much more healthy than I was the first time.
Ms. Smith, when you first made contact with Dr. Oziel back in, I believe it was early June of 1989, you called him because you'd gotten some information about the Phobia Institute from some tapes that you'd listened to, correct?
Correct.
And one of the reasons that you called Dr. Oziel is because you were the owner of a tape duplicating business at that time, correct?
It's incorrect that is the reason I called him. It is correct that I am the owner of a tape duplicating business.
Do you remember talking to the police on March the 6th of 1990? Page
Yes.
5842.
Page which?
Page 5842. What's your numbering?
Oh.
Thanks.
Which page is it?
The first one. Why did you call in Oziel? I mean, in terms of your profession, how did you happen to get in touch with this? Your answer, why did I call him in regards to those tapes? Mr. Al-Hadif, why would that kind of activity be of interest to you? Your answer, because two things. I'm a writer. Mr. Al-Hadif said, okay. And you say, I have an audio-video tape duplication business. Do you remember telling Mr. Al-Hadif that?
Yes, and would you like to know why I said what I said there?
No, Ms. Smith. I asked you the question. Your answer was as it was, correct? Now, at page 5845, do you remember also saying that maybe you could give them a better price in their duplication of the tapes? Do you remember telling the police that?
Yes.
It's the last line of the first paragraph. Okay. And one of your motivations in calling Dr. Oziel when you first made contact with him is that you wanted to see if you could make some sort of business deal for those tapes. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
Ms. Smith, I'm going to show you the first page of Exhibit 120, which is something that you testified, I think, before the break on cross-examination. You gave Dr. Oziel your business card for sound and light, correct?
That's correct.
And you say here in this particular document, if you don't have your own tape line, you should, since that is my business, perhaps I could be of some help to you, or the, what is that word?
Center.
Or the center. So please file my business card for further use.
For future use, not further. There's a big difference.
For future use.
Correct.
Okay, so now when I just made that mistake, you corrected me, not for punctuation, but for content, right?
No, that's right now.
Were you in fact correcting me in that mistake for content or punctuation?
Objection.
I'm not suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder at this moment, like I was at the time of the document you're talking about.
Why did you send Dr. Oziel your business card on June the 15th of 1989?
Because we had talked extensively in regards to therapy, which was the reason that I had called, and I thought that he was very kind and considerate to have spent so much time with me, and it ended up that he referred me outside of his clinic to 3 other doctors that had nothing to do with his clinic. And so I sent him a thank you note for that, along with a gift of a poetry book that I had written. And I never thought I would ever have any future contact with him. And we hadn't discussed whether or not his center had any other tapes or not, or whether they had an interest in them. We had not discussed business at all. And in fact, until I sent him this card, he didn't even know what type of business I was in.
At page 5845, the first paragraph, do you remember telling the police on March the 6th the following? He called me back because I had left a message with the Phobia Institute, and he's the director of it. So he called me back and informed me that Dorsey was no longer at the Institute. And I said, well, do you have, does anyone else at the Institute have tape programs, or this or that, or whatever? And then I told him I was in the tape duplication business, and that, on a couple of levels. One, I was interested for my own personal reasons, and the other, I was interested because I would like to know who did their duplication, that maybe I could give them a better price than,
Do you want the real answer?
Well, I'm asking you, did you tell the police that on March the 6th?
I told the police that, but do you want to know
Ms. Smith?
the reason behind that? I had a reason for telling the police what I told them. This is the only conscious lie I've ever told at all in this.
Wait for another question.
You didn't tell the police that he was your therapist either, did you?
No, and I had a safety reason for why I did not tell them that.
Was that a conscious lie on your part, Ms. Smith?
Yes.
All right, so when you say that this is the only conscious lie you've ever told, that was a lie. You've told 2 conscious lies to the police as of this moment, correct?
Incorrect.
Well, you told them a lie about why you went to Dr. Ozil. You told them a lie about your being his patient. Are there any other lies that you told the
They're the
police?
same thing. They're not 2 different issues. They're the same thing.
Ms. Smith, you and Dr. Ozil became lovers at some point, didn't you?
Don't you want to know the truth about
Excuse
why
me.
I told the police
Your
that?
Honor, could you please strike Ms. Smith's comment to me? I think I'm doing the
All
questioning.
right, let's not argue. Just have to answer the question. If you
Right.
want to ask you something else. Your next question, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Smith, you and Dr. Ozil became lovers in July of 1989, correct?
I'm not sure if it was July or August.
May we approach, please, for a moment? May we approach?
Yes.
I wouldn't characterize it as that. The initial sexual contact was not. It's very hard without.
Well,
This is not to tell the story of my trauma with Dr. Ozil, but
Your Honor,
it was not a romantic
Hold on a second.
relationship.
Let's have the question like that. Yeah, you can't answer it, just don't answer it.
Question, and you had a romantic relationship with him, is that correct?
I would not characterize it as romantic.
were you involved in this relationship, whatever you want to call it, on October the 31st of 1989 when you went to Dr. Ozil's office?
I'm unclear as to what your meaning is.
Okay, and the night that you went, on Halloween night, when you went to Dr. Ozil's office, you were still involved in a relationship with him of whatever description, correct?
I still knew him. I still had contact with him.
All right, and when you went there that night, I believe you indicated that for yours and his protection, you even armed yourself with a gun. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you remember testifying in front of Judge Albrecht that you listened at the doorway during the October 31st session?
Asked and answered, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Do you remember telling Judge Albrecht that?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Did you tell Judge Albrecht that you had listened at the door and heard conversation on October the 31st?
I don't recall what I told Dr. Albrecht, or
Judge
Albrecht. I really don't remember the testimony there.
Court and Counsel, page 85 of the transcript.
Which day?
Well, it's all numbers sequentially. 85 is from the 30th of July of 1990. Starting at line 4, question by Judge Albrecht. Did Dr. Ozil go back in the office? Answer, yes. Question, at that point, did you start listening? Answer, I went into the inner hallway to check on the offices.
Object this as being misleading, because then he gets to at what point during the proceedings the relationship was.
Overruled. You can consider it.
Thank you. Question, at that point, did you start listening? Answer, I went into the inner hallway to check on the offices to see which office door was open. Question at line 13. And while you were doing that, were you also trying to listen to what was going on inside Dr. Ozil's office? Answer, yes. Question, and did you hear anything? Answer, some. And then I went back to the waiting area. Question, did you hear anything that sounded like threats? Answer, Eric was just upset. Question, the question is, did you hear any threats at that point? Answer, no. Then, page 107, which is the testimony from the following day, July the 31st. Okay. At line 1 on page 107, this is your testimony from July the 31st of 1990. Question. You have testified to what you say you heard Lyle say. Did you hear anything else by way of conversation from Jerry's office between the time Lyle arrived and the time you went back to the waiting room? Answer. On that particular night, all that really stands out in my mind was the threats. There were other meetings where I heard more of a conversation. Question, let's do it one at a time. You went back to the waiting room after you heard the person you believed threatened to kill Dr. Oziel, and you sat down. Answer, yes. Question, and you sat there until Eric came out. Answer, Eric came running out. Question, and Eric had to run right past you. Answer, yes, he did. Did you give that testimony to Judge Albrecht on July the 31st of 1990?
I don't remember. I have no recollection of my testimony there. But as you're reading it, it sounds like something I would have said.
Referring now to the same day, page 148, starting at line 2. Yeah, starting at line 2. This is a question by a defense attorney at line 2. Well, on October the 31st, all you heard was, what you are saying is you heard Lyle make a threat to Dr. Oziel. Answer, yes. Question, and you didn't hear anything else. Answer, well, I heard him say to his brother. Question, that's when you were standing by the door. Didn't you testify to that yesterday? Answer, I was standing in the hall or next to the door somewhere in that area. Did you give that testimony to Judge Albrecht on July the 31st?
Again, I've told you I have no recollection of that testimony at all. I can only take your word that that testimony was given. I know that I was there, and I know what was said to me just before I left, but I know nothing that happened after I was sworn in.
Would you agree that you did hear threats coming from Dr. Oziel's office on October the 31st?
Now? Are you asking me now?
Yes, now. In your present recollection, did you hear some sort of threats being made from Dr. Oziel's office on that day?
No, not that I directly heard, no.
Did you hear Lyle Menendez threaten his brother?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a threat that you now recall that you heard. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, after the session of October the 31st, Dr. Oziel went out to a car, and you went and you looked from his office down at the car, correct?
Yes.
And you saw Dr. Oziel, Lyle Menendez, and Eric Menendez standing near a vehicle which was a Jeep type of vehicle, correct?
Incorrect.
Okay, what did you see, or what do you remember seeing?
I didn't recall seeing Eric outside of the vehicle. I only remember seeing Lyle and Dr. Oziel.
And do you have a specific recollection sitting here today of that particular event? Do you have a picture in your mind of seeing what you saw on the street on October 31st?
Now? No.
When Dr. Oziel came back into the office, did he tell you what had happened during the session?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He basically said word for word what happened from the time that he and Eric met at 4 in the afternoon up until what happened at the Jeep.
Now, when Dr. Oziel came back into the office, did he perform any activities or did he go anywhere or do anything before he began to give you the details of what he'd heard?
Yes.
What did he do?
We went through each room and locked the doors behind us.
And what else did you do?
And then he said that he had to call Laurel and that he was going to, talk to her, and so he gave us both some of the information while he was on the phone to her.
All right, so
And he made phone calls. And then when we were driving from the office to his house in Sherman Oaks is when he, went back over it again, what happened. Because he wasn't as detailed. He didn't tell Laurel as much as he told me.
what did you overhear him telling his wife Laurel in that phone call?
I can't differentiate exactly what.
You can't recall?
I recall some parts of that conversation, but I can't recall the conversation word for word from beginning to end.
Which parts of the conversation can you recall here today?
Well, the things that stick out to me are how he was joking about that she had to pack underwear and not to put underwear that had holes in it because I was a classy woman and he didn't want her putting any of his holy underwear or holy socks in the bag. I remember the odd things more than the content of the therapy things because it was an odd thing for him to be laughing and joking about what he wanted her to pack in his suitcase.
Did you hear him say anything about either of the defendants confessing to murder?
Yes, he did tell Laurel that the brothers had killed their parents.
All right, and so would that have stood out more in your mind than the holes in his underwear or less?
No, I already knew that.
When you say you already knew that, do you mean you already knew that the defendants had confessed?
Yes, before he said that on the telephone to Laurel, yes.
How did you know that?
Because we had talked, he had come out earlier, even before Lyle arrived. He stuck his head out the door and he said that it was as he suspected.
Hey, I believe you indicated that you got more details when you were in the car with him going to pick up his suitcase. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what details do you recall he told you on that trip?
I have a hard time taking myself back to that incident. I don't know what you want to know.
I want to know what details Dr. Oziel told you about what the brothers said about the killings of their parents.
Have you ever heard Oziel drone on and on? I mean, this was hours and hours of dialogue. I can't.
We actually have heard him drone on and on and on. Unfortunately, we saw 6 parts of his testimony in the state's case, and I'm glad it's over. I'll just leave it at that. He does drone on and on and on. He likes the sound of his own voice.
Your Honor, may that
under
be-
these conditions, try to repeat what he had said, word for word.
All right, Chair, next question.
All right, so is it your testimony here today that you cannot or will not repeat the details of what Dr. Oziel told you during that trip?
I think it's, and you're asking something that's quite impossible to do under these circumstances, and considering how verbose Dr. Oziel is.
Dr. Oziel, is it verbose? Is that your testimony?
Dr. Oziel goes on and on what a normal person can say in 10 minutes. It takes him 10 hours to say. So do you want me to give you a summation of what he said?
Yes.
You don't understand the question, or you can't answer it?
I understand the question, but it's just so broad. Do you want me to go on for 10 hours about this one question?
Ms. Smyth,
Just be more specific, and I'll tell you if he said that night or not.
did Dr. Oziel tell you any of the details of how the murder was committed on October the 31st of 1989?
No.
Okay. What was the kind of information that he gave you? Could you just give us a summary, since I wasn't there, could you just give us a summary of what he said to you?
About what?
About what the defendant said about the killings of their parents.
That night, I don't think there was any information about the killings of the parents other than that they had done it. Oziel's focus, and the majority of the things I recall, was his saying how he needed to get control of them, that he represented to me at that time that they had run out of the office without making another appointment, which this was reason for us to be very, very frightened and fearful. And he kept saying over and over that he believed that at that moment that they were going to get the shotguns so that they could come out to the Sherman Oaks house to kill him.
Now, 2 days later, you returned to Dr. Oziel's office and you were present during another session with Eric and Lyle Menendez. Is that correct?
Correct.
And during that period of time, you overheard some of what was said in the office. Is that correct?
Bits and pieces, yes.
Okay. Did you hear any discussion about confidentiality between Dr. Oziel and Lyle Menendez?
I know I heard the word confidentiality. Everything from the sessions between November 2nd and December 11th all condensed together for me, so it's so hard for me to differentiate. But he did talk to them about confidentiality at some point. I'm not positive whether it's November 2nd or...
Report and counsel, page 112 of the testimony of Judalon Smyth on July the 31st of 1990. At page 112 at line 9, you were asked a question by Ms. Abramson. Line 9. And on this occasion, November 2nd, did you hear Jerry say anything to Lyle or Eric concerning how everything they told him would be a secret, would be confidential? Your answer was yes. Question, did you hear Jerry talking about the fact that he has other patients, one or more, who are hitmen and he never tells their secrets? Answer, yes. Was that true testimony when you gave it in July of 1990?
That was true testimony.
Okay, and did you in fact hear that being said on November the 2nd of 1989?
I don't know if I really heard it or not, but I know that Jerry Oziel, after over and over, talked to me about the hitman. And he also made a point that he had said it to Lyle and Eric, so I don't know whether I really heard that said at that time or if it was just put into my mind that I heard it. I don't know.
At page 13 of your affidavit, which you signed on June the 8th of 1990, do you have that in front of you? Exhibit 351?
Yes.
Would you please turn to page 13, starting at line 8? Do you have the location, line 8? Mm-hmm. All right. In the affidavit, it indicates, after they arrived, I heard some of the conversation. Other parts of the conversation were later told to me by Dr. Oziel. Is it correct that you heard part of the conversation on November the 2nd?
Yes.
Okay. At line 25, at the bottom of page 13, you indicate, at this session, I heard some laughing, and it seemed to be friendly, although Lyle got real worked up if someone else harmed Jerry. On to page 14, line 3.
Excuse me, is there a question?
Yeah, I'm reading this to her, to impeach her. I heard Lyle laugh about killing his father at one point. He said on more than one occasion words to the effect, well, for once my father wouldn't be able to put me down or criticize me because I committed the perfect murder. I guess he'd have to congratulate me for once and not find fault with me because I committed the perfect murder. And that portion is in quotes. And then it goes on and says, and he laughed again. At line 10, it goes on and says, I was later told by Dr. Oziel, and there's some facts. Now, is it your testimony here today that you never heard Lyle Menendez laugh about killing his father?
I heard a portion of this, which Oziel filled in the blank, so I believed at the time that I made the statement that this is what I had heard.
And what part do you remember sitting here today hearing regarding that particular portion of the November 2nd session?
Well, there was some laughter in the room. And I'd heard Lyle say something about his father, you know, like, and it could have even been that he said, once my father. But when I asked Oziel about why they were laughing, then this is exactly, because there was laughter, then there was something about once my father or for once my father. I'm not really sure if the for was there, but then it became low, and then after a little while there was laughter again, and I asked him what they were laughing about, and then he, you know, told me this, and he made a big issue over this.
When you talked to Diane Sawyer and the tape was aired on August the 30th, you also told her that you heard Lyle say, and it was really disturbing to you, quote, well, for once my father would have to congratulate me and give me credit, that I planned the perfect murder. I carried out the perfect murder. So is it your testimony that you lied to Diane Sawyer when you told her that you actually heard each and every one of those words?
No, I never lied to Diane Sawyer.
You were just suffering from false beliefs. Would that be it?
I had been brainwashed. I had been told over and over what I did hear, what did happen, and I was confused. I'm sure I wasn't aware that I was so confused, but at the time that I talked with her, I didn't know the difference between what I heard and didn't hear.
She was totally being gaslit to believe certain things happened in ways that they did by Dr. Oziel. He is a gaslighting, manipulating MFer. I don't like Dr. Oziel.
Referring now to page 18 of your affidavit that you signed on June the 8th of 1990, starting at line 3. Now, before I ask you about page 18, I believe you've indicated that you heard several sessions. Is that correct? You overheard several sessions? And how many sessions did you eavesdrop on of Dr. Oziel with the defendants?
You mean how many sessions did he require me to be at?
How many? My question, Ms. Smyth, is, did you understand my question? How many sessions did you listen to on separate dates?
She understood your question, Pam, and she corrected it. That's what just happened. I hate prosecutors that do this, but yeah, so she's trying to put words into her mouth saying that it's one thing, but really it's not. And she's going to correct her because this is on the record. This is under oath. She's going to correct and make sure that she's not leaving the jury with some kind of a false impression, because Judalon Smyth, she seems like an intelligent, smart, classy, as as what's his face put it, Oziel put it. She is a classy lady. She's well put together. She speaks well. She's eloquent. She has class, and she was way too classy for him.
I have a problem with this listen to. Are you asking how many times Oziel required me to be at the office?
Okay, let's start with that. How many times were you required by Dr. Oziel to be at the office?
It was my understanding that the first time that I was not requested or required to be there by Dr. Oziel was December 11th. So however many times, you know, both or one of the brothers came to his office between October 31st and December 11th, it's my belief that I was there.
Well, my question to you, Ms. Smyth, is how many sessions did you actually attend?
I am not sure.
How many sessions did you attend where you heard things through the door?
I'm not sure of the number of times.
Would it be the same number of times that you attended or a lesser amount?
She doesn't understand the question.
Okay. You indicated that there were sessions at which you were required to attend by Dr. Oziel. Would it be correct to say that at some of those sessions you actually went up to the door and listened, right?
In the first session, that's correct.
Did you listen at the second session?
At the second session, there were things that I overheard.
Okay. And how was it that you were able to overhear things at the second session?
The same way as when I was at the first session.
Okay. And that was because you put yourself in a position where you could hear better, correct?
I would go and check to see if everything was all right.
Of all the sessions that you attended, did you listen to things being said inside the office at all?
After that, I was basically in another office because everything after that becomes very muddled and very confusing to me. At some point, Oziel said that he didn't want the brothers to see me in the waiting room anymore because he felt that they were becoming suspicious and might think I was an undercover policewoman. So then I would be in the office before they arrived and not come out till after they left.
Did you ever attend any sessions where only one of the brothers was there?
I don't know. I only know what Oziel represented to me, and I can't even accurately convey that about that time period.
To the best of your recollection sitting here today, how many sessions did you hear?
The only two dates I can positively give you are October 31st and November 2nd.
I believe you've indicated in previous testimony that you were present at a session on November the 14th of 1989, correct?
I was given that date by a third party. I did not know that date and could not substantiate the date other than through the third party.
May I approach the exhibit 97, please, Your Honor? I'm going to show you the records from the sessions. And looking at 1989, it appears that there are sessions here on October the 31st, November the 2nd, and it appears from the billing sheet that both defendants were present at these two sessions, correct? It says EL.
Okay.
All right, do you see that here?
Yes.
All right, and then there's an entry for November the 28th with only an E next to it. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you see any entry here for November the 14th?
No. But I did not come up with the date of November 14th. A third party did.
So that might be a mistake, is that correct?
I believe that is a mistake.
Now, Ms. Smith, in your affidavit at page 18, did you sign the document? Do you have the affidavit in front of you, page 18?
Yes.
Okay, and you signed the document which contains the following at line 10.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That's already coming.
Ms. Smith, I'm going to ask you if you signed the affidavit which contains the following. While I was in the next office listening to the conversation in Dr. Oziel's office with the defendants, I heard a detailed description of the killings was given by the defendants which included the following. 2 weeks before...
This is what I'm going to object to. First of all, this is vague as to what session is being discussed, and the previous objection we raised before appears on line 21.
Objections are
Okay. 2 weeks before the murder, they made an...
Is it just me, or does this judge overrule every single objection by Leslie Abramson? I think it would be interesting to see how many times throughout the trial he actually does overrule any objections that she has against the prosecution, because it seems a little lopsided.
excuse and drove to San Diego. With some false identification, they bought 2 shotguns. They chose to use shotguns because there was no waiting period. The place where they bought may have videotaped the purchase, and they were fearful.
The objection, Your Honor.
The place where they bought may have videotaped.
Can we approach?
Can I finish?
Well, I'd like to approach before she finishes, because I don't think the foundation that the court has indicated might be appropriate here.
No, the way the witness has answered the question, it has. Objection overruled. You may proceed.
Thank you. The place where they were bought may have videotaped the purchase, and they were fearful that the videotape would disclose.
You know what I mean? Like, she should be able to approach the bench if she wants to.
The place where they bought may have videotaped.
Can we approach?
Can I finish?
Well, I'd like to approach before she finishes, because I don't think the foundation that the court has indicated might be appropriate here.
No, the way the witness has answered the question, it has. Objection overruled. You may proceed.
Thank you. The place where they were bought may have videotaped the purchase, and they were fearful that the videotape would disclose their identity or that they would not be able to get rid of the shotguns. They checked to find out, and they told Dr. Oziel that the place holds on to them for 3 or 4 months, and then they use them over. After purchasing the 2 shotguns in San Diego, they returned home to carry out the remainder of the plan.
Your Honor, I would like to approach, please.
All right. Is that the question you were going to ask?
Well, yes, but I'm going to continue on. There's a whole other page, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, let's break it down and ask her whether or not she overheard that.
Okay. And so, Ms. Smith, having gotten to the bottom of page 18, ending with the word plan, did you overhear that particular description?
No, I did not.
So when you signed under penalty of perjury for Judge Albrecht all of these details, which you indicate you heard from listening in the next office, that was a lie, wasn't it?
The district attorney kept telling me that that didn't really matter, that it wasn't that important, because there were parts of things I heard and parts of things I didn't hear, and so he said that it couldn't be written that way, and that this was all right. It was represented to me that
The district attorney was telling her how she should state her narrative. What? Say that again.
because they were telling me that the district attorney kept telling me that that didn't really matter, that it wasn't that important, because there were parts of things I heard and parts of things I didn't hear, and so he said that it couldn't be written that way, and that this was all right. It was represented to me that this was just the way it had to be written. So, no, there are parts of things in here that I can say yes, and things that I can say no.
All right, when you say there are things in here you can say yes, are you saying that there are things that I've just read to you that you actually heard with your own ears?
Well, there are things, no, there are things that were told to me over and over and over to the point of where I didn't know at that time whether I had heard them or whether I was told.
When someone tells you something over and over and over again, your brain picks up the repetition. We learn from repetition. All that repetition, whether we believe it or not, it gets into your subconscious. So she hears these things, and now she has her own experiences. She has the experiences that Oziel is telling her she's having. And now you've got the DA telling her, well, it can't be said that way, so we have to flip it this way. What? This poor woman, like, she just wants to speak her truth, and I feel like nobody's letting her.
Would it be fair to say then that your testimony here today is that you never heard either of the defendants discussing any details with your own two ears? Would that be correct?
I would say that considering that I've had no reason to examine all of those things to determine what is what at this point in time, that I would be most comfortable with saying that I can't be responsible and say that I heard them because of what Jerry Oziel did to me as far as implanting memories and ideas that didn't exist.
Did you tell that to did you tell that to Judge Albrecht when you testified in front of him in July of 1990 that you couldn't be responsible for your...
I wasn't aware of it at that time.
Well, when you talked to the police in March, you mentioned to them several times that you thought Dr. Oziel might have brainwashed you, didn't you?
I mentioned that, but I didn't know the extent.
All right, so when you signed this...
I mean, I knew something strange and something unusual, that he was doing something strange and unusual to me, but I didn't know the extent. And when someone blocks your own memory so that you don't know what it is that they have done, how are you supposed to know to warn everybody else? I'm discovering all the time, things that Oziel implanted in my mind.
Continuing on at the bottom of page 18, starting with the word they. Should we break for lunch? I'm not going to finish before lunch.
How much longer do you have?
About an hour, hopefully less.
All right, then let's resume at 1:15, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can give counsel adequate time to complete this testimony and go on to something else. We're already behind our schedule. So let's resume at 1:15. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. 1:15.
Ms. Smyth, shortly after the defendants left Dr. Oziel's office on October the 31st, you've indicated that he made some phone calls to various people, correct?
Correct.
And during the period of time that he made the phone calls, did he give any indication of what he had heard during the October 31st session to the people he talked to? Do you understand my question?
Yes, I'm trying to remember the phone calls. He gave a scenario to the various people, other than Laurel. The other people, he gave a scenario
Okay, what was
to them.
What was the scenario he gave to the other people?
I don't recall exactly, but it was very, very similar to the situation of, like, if a patient came in and confessed, and what should I do, and who can I tell, and...
Did he mention anything about being threatened when he gave the scenario?
Yes, he said he was threatened.
And at that time, you had heard those threats, correct?
I had heard... You're referring to the elevator?
Well, you had heard... Well, did you consider the incident at the elevator to be a threat?
Your Honor, just ask and answer.
Can you answer?
At the time that I actually heard the good luck, I didn't think it was a threat. I thought that Lyle wanted to get away. Then Oziel convinced me that it was a threat, so then I did believe it was a threat.
What did you hear Dr. Oziel say to his wife, Laurel, about what the defendants had told him that evening?
I don't recall exactly.
Do you recall inexactly?
I recall more the details. I recall other things that aren't what they said.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
About the lie that he made up for what they should tell people, why she was leaving the house and why she was staying in a hotel with the children and why he was staying with me. I remember those things more because they pertained more to me.
So you recall better the things that pertain to you than the details of a confession to murder. Is that correct?
At this time, that is correct.
I mean, duh. Most people remember things that are more related to themselves and what's going on in their lives. She was terrified about this Oziel dude, and he was terrifying her about these Menendez boys who she didn't even perceive as a threat until he said they were a threat. So, oh, I hate this Dr. Oziel. Oh, why do we got the spinny thing?
Correct.
Now, I believe I asked you before lunch if you had given an interview to a writer named Dominic Dunn for an article that appeared in October of 1990, and I believe you indicated that you had spoken to Mr. Dunn, correct?
Correct.
On how many occasions would you say you spoke to Mr. Dunn?
Prior to the writing of the article?
Yes, or the publication of the
You
article.
mean, are you just talking about how many interviews that I had regarding that article?
Correct.
Just one, I believe.
Did you tell Mr. Dunn that listening through the door to the doctor's meeting with the boys, you heard Lyle become furious with Eric for having confessed? Did you tell Dominic Dunn that?
Correct.
The article goes on and says, she told me he made threats to Oziel that they were going to kill him. Did you tell Mr. Dunn that?
Correct. I told everyone that at that time.
Okay, did you also tell him, quote, I never thought I believed in evil, but when I heard those boys speak, I did.
Object to that, Your Honor. That's right. Well, the objection is...
Did you tell that? Did you tell that to Mr. Dunn?
Correct.
Okay. And when you told him, when I heard those boys speak, did you mean to convey to Mr. Dunn that you'd actually heard them speak?
I spoke with Lyle in the waiting room, and I spoke with, there was many different times that I've heard them speak.
Did you also tell Mr. Dunn they did go to the theater to buy tickets? Did you tell Mr. Dunn that?
I object to that, Your Honor, and ask to approach. Can I make a record as to the grounds of my objection?
All right, you may do that.
I just want to make sure that it's clear.
You may continue.
Ms. Smith, were you ever given information that the defendants went to the movie theater to buy tickets before the crime?
Yes.
And who gave you that information?
Oziel?
Do you remember?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay moved to strike.
Overruled. The answer will stand.
Do you have a specific recollection sitting here in court today of him telling you that?
Yes, at this point, this is just being, well,
Yeah, both sides are now objecting to it, Judge. What you got to say? He's just going to say it's not being offered for whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's just being offered to blah, blah.
yes, at this point, this is just being, well, I'll give the admonition after we hear some further testimony, so let's hold off on that. Go ahead.
Ms. Smith, do you have a
After?
recollection?
No, you're not supposed to give the admonition after. You're supposed to say before they give the testimony that's damning.
Sitting here today of Dr. Oziel telling you that fact.
It wasn't told to me just once, so it's hard to... all of these things were said to me over and over and over many, many times, so I can't give you one specific time that it was said. It was said many, many, many times.
And so so your answer is yes, you have a recollection of him telling you that, correct?
Correct.
I believe you indicated in your direct examination that Dr. Oziel was never in fear of the defendants. Do you remember your testimony in that regard?
That's my belief.
Okay. When you testified in front of Judge Albrecht on July the 30th of 1990 at page 69, line 6. Can I start? At page 69, line 6, you indicated, then we went out of town several times because we were afraid. Question, we being you and Dr. Oziel? Answer, yes. On page 70, during the same day, the same testimony, you indicated at line 9 of page 70, because he said that he was afraid that if he went to the police that the boys would kill him for sure. Do you remember giving testimony in that regard about the boys would kill him for sure?
I do not remember any of that testimony, but those statements are correct in my belief.
All right, and so your belief here today is that Dr. Oziel did not want to go to the police because he was afraid of being killed. Is that correct?
That's not my belief. That's what Dr. Oziel stated, that we could not go to the police because the police were not trustworthy and the police were owned by the Menendez family.
Okay, so he indicated to you his belief that the police were owned by the Menendez family?
Many times he told me that the police were owned by the Menendez family.
The police are owned by the Menendez family. So you can't go to the police. Well, who does she think they are? Like some big crime mob or something? I don't even think they have family here. They're only the Menendez boys and Jose and Kitty, right? In LA or Beverly Hills, wherever their mansion is. I can't remember. They probably have more than one. Rich people. Which house should I live in right now? Oh, I don't know. I'm bored with this house. Let's go buy another one. Must be nice. So what, like, he acts like they're this big crime boss family and they own the police, and Oziel can't go to the police or else he'll get whacked. Okay. I don't believe it. But I mean, I believe it came out of Oziel's mouth. I believe all these things came out of Oziel's mouth.
On the following day, on July the 31st of 1990, do you remember giving the following testimony in front of Judge Albrecht? Page 165, line 7. But they were two very extreme behaviors. He would act in a very frightened manner, unguarded, buying the shotguns, coming to my house and being frantic and making all these phone calls. And at one point he was going to liquidate everything, and he got furious and angry at me because when he started talking about disappearing from California, I didn't want to disappear from California. And I finally said, okay, you go. At line 20, you said yes. He did things that I know he absolutely was afraid. But ego-wise, he would later, down the line, when he started feeling more secure, he would verbally say, no, he wasn't. And then he would laugh and be cavalier. It was back.
We heard him in the messages being like, haha, I'm not afraid of anything, as if. So he acts afraid to make Judalon afraid and to manipulate her and to make her think that her life's in danger. Also, he can get her to do whatever he wants. And all the while, he's not afraid, and he's not acting afraid, and he makes jokes about it like, haha, as if I would ever be afraid of anybody.
And forth. Was this a correct statement of how Dr. Oziel was behaving around the time of October 31st and November 2nd? What you told Judge Albrecht?
I'm uncomfortable with your time frame that you're putting on it. His behavior was very flip-flop. He would do things which I perceived as fear behavior, like buying shotguns, and why he did them and for who, I believe he did those things for my benefit to make me more frightened. How he acted outside of my presence, I'm not really sure.
But you indicated to Judge Albrecht that he did engage in manners when he was unguarded.
He did go buy shotguns. He was not unguarded. Jerry Oziel is never unguarded. Jerry Oziel is very conscious of every movement he ever makes.
Ms. Smyth, that wasn't my question. My question was...
You said he was unguarded, and I'm correcting you. He is never unguarded.
You indicated in your testimony at page 165 on July the 31st of 1990, there were two very extreme behaviors. He would act in a very frightened manner, unguarded. That was your choice of words in front of Judge Albrecht.
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't know what that means in that way.
Wait, hold on a second. Why don't you re-ask the question?
Okay. Is it your testimony then? I think you just indicated that Dr. Oziel never acted in an unguarded manner. Is that correct? Yes or no?
That's correct. He is not an unguarded person.
So when you told Judge Albrecht that he acted very frightened when he was unguarded, that was not true then. Is that correct?
I don't remember any of that testimony. I told you that I was not conscious of the testimony given at that time, so I could have had programmed statements. And anything, whenever I use the word absolutely, you have to be very suspect of what comes after that, because absolutely is an Oziel program word. So I don't know why I would say unguarded, because that's not my belief about Jerry Oziel.
That's not your belief now, correct?
We also heard an audio recording in part 1 of Oziel repeatedly saying the word thorns, 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 trying to get her to come back to a different mindset, apparently, as if he had hypnotized her, and that's a trigger word to make her more amiable or something. I don't know, to make her more agreeable, whatever it means. This MFer hypnotized her, manipulated her, gaslit her, did all these horrible things, and messed with her memories of this entire situation. She just said, she couldn't be any clearer in her testimony. I am not responsible for the testimony that I said in prior hearings because my brain was totally brainwashed by Dr. Oziel. So you can't trust what I said in a prior hearing. I'm telling you now, to the best of my recollection, what I remember. She's a great witness for the defense. She's a good witness for anybody who, wants to stay strong in their conviction. She doesn't impeach easily. She's good.
That is not my belief now about Jerry Oziel.
And when later
It was
on...
not my belief when I went to the police about Jerry Oziel.
Now, referring to your affidavit that you signed on June the 8th of 1990, I have placed it in front of you there on the witness stand. Would you please go to page 8? In the affidavit, it indicates at lines 6 through 10, I was also particularly concerned because, after hearing Lyle threaten, quote, now we have to kill him and anyone connected to him who knows we're connected to him, end of quote, I had heard the threat to include references to the secretary, quote, because there's a secretary that you go through to make appointments, end of quote. Is it your testimony here today that the information that I've just read to you from your affidavit is not true?
No, I did believe this.
No. Did you
It
hear
was
it?
my understanding that he had threatened the secretary.
Do you see at line 6, the word is used after hearing Lyle threaten?
I did not write this document.
You corrected it 4 times, correct?
Yes, but I got admonished for every little tiny thing I corrected. They didn't want me marking up their whole document.
Ms. Smyth, the document you have in front of you has been marked up by yourself, hasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like Menendez to ask the answer.
She's already answered the fact that she didn't get to make all the corrections she wanted to. So there's that. So you can't impeach her with that.
Ruled as to the latter objection sustained as to form. Rephrase the question.
Ms. Smith, you
I was
indicate,
allowed to change a few things.
and you did change a few things, isn't that correct?
A few things, yes.
Would you go ahead now to page 11? At some point after the first session, did Dr. Oziel indicate to you that he had to get the defendants back in to talk to him so that he could convince them that if they were caught, he would fabricate a defense for them? Did he ever tell you that?
I'm sorry, the way that you phrase that, I don't understand. Are you asking me that?
I'm asking you if Dr. Oziel told you that he wanted to induce the defendants back
That's correct.
so that he could convince them that if they got caught, he would fabricate a defense for them based on future sessions. Did he tell you that?
He told me that he needed to get the boys back so he could get control of them, so he needed to convince them that he was their only ally, their only hope.
Did he tell you in what manner he was going to convince them that he was their ally?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
That he would help them, that he would be the only person who could testify as to how justified they were in what they did.
And did he indicate to you that he was going to
I don't want to call him any more names. I've already called him many. Hear that again.
He was their only ally, their only hope.
Did he tell you in what manner he was going to convince them that he was their ally?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
That he would help them, that he would be the only person who could testify as to how justified they were in what they did.
And did he indicate to you that he was going to help?
He's going to help them help them justify the actions because of knowing the truth about their parents, perhaps. But that's exactly the opposite of what he did, because who did he testify for? The prosecution. And he wasn't very helpful for the boys at all.
Them fabricate a defense.
Makes me so mad.
I perceived it as that, yes.
Now, referring ahead to page 19
He was going to help them fabricate a defense, is what she just said.
of the affidavit that you signed on June the 8th. All right, Ms. Smith, in the affidavit at line 10, it indicates the following. On the night of the murders, they did not go to the movie. Instead, they were at home to kill their parents. Lyle did not trust Eric to go through with the plan and made Eric shoot first. The information I've just read to you, did you overhear that information?
That was told me by Dr. Oziel, and this word plan, I don't believe that I said plan over and over.
Well,
I mean, plan
okay, now,
was like Oziel uses the word plan.
okay. Well, you said you didn't use the word plan over and over. I'd like to have you go back to page 18, the bottom line 26. Would you just turn back one page, please? Yeah. At the bottom of that page, line 26, there's the phrase remainder of the plan. Was that, I take it then that was not your choice of words, is that correct?
If I had been allowed to type my own statement, I think it would read, probably very close to this, because this was my belief at the time, but there are certain word choices that are not my words. They're either words that were programmed into me by Oziel or words that the parties who wrote this chose to use.
And then the last word on page 18, it goes.
That's the problem when you don't have witnesses write their own statements. You put it in the officer's words or you put it in someone else's words, and it's not their words anymore. And you don't have them sign. Well, she signed it. Unfortunately, they did have her sign it, even though she tried to make changes and then they got mad at her. So there's that. That's why the person making the statement should write it themselves.
Goes over to page 19, plan to kill their mother and father as they were by themselves watching TV at home. Then is it your testimony here today that that is not accurate? In other words, that was not a plan?
I don't know. This is accurate as far as what was conveyed to me by Oziel, but I don't know what plan they had or didn't have.
At line 13 of page 19, the affidavit continues and says the father either died instantly or quickly, more so than the mother, because they described the mother as continuing to move or gasp or make sounds, and that they had to just really keep shooting and shooting her. Now, did you hear that information yourself, or were you told that by Dr. Oziel?
I was told this by Dr. Oziel.
And the fact that
Your Honor, there's going to be a continuing objection on hearsay grounds to what she was told by Dr. Oziel, unless there is an admonition that none of this is being offered for the truth.
Oops.
All right, we'll deal with that later.
Well, I move to strike, since there is no such admonition now, all of these statements that were told.
All right, the objection is overruled, but we'll deal with this perhaps at the same time it deals with any requests relating to questions asked of the witness by the defense along the same lines.
Well, our objection is that there is no foundation for either inconsistent or consistent statements, and that's why we're making that
All
objection.
right, objection is overruled. The answer will stand. The next question, please.
okay. Yes, Ms. Smith, would you refer back to page 18 briefly and look at line 10? Now, the series of facts that I'm reading to you follows the sentence that begins at line 10 on page 18, which says, while I was in the next office listening to the conversation. Do you see that particular language there?
Yes.
And that was in the affidavit when you signed it on June the 8th, correct?
I assume so.
You have the original in front of you. You don't see any whiteout or types overs there, do you?
No.
Okay. Referring now to page 19. Do you have page 19 in front of you?
Yes.
Line 16.
I don't really know what any of this is proving because she's already told you. She's already told you. She doesn't know if they're her words or Dr. Oziel's words. She's gone through therapy. She's had to try to parse out what memories are really hers and which ones weren't. So it's not like she's going to be very effective. And we know somebody else already wrote this for her and wouldn't let her make the changes she wanted to. So I don't know what the point of reading all this is, but okay, go ahead, Pam Bazanich. Go right ahead.
The mother and father were both on the couch in a den or TV room and were watching TV. The mother was the one Eric talked about. Parts of the body were severed. The arm was shot off. The mother's head was blown off or badly shot up. The bodies were really mutilated. The defendant spoke of the eyeball coming out of the eye socket, the parts of the brains on the wall. They talked about the smell of the blood in the room, and they shot it up so much.
Trigger warning, I guess I should say. Trigger warning. She just goes right into it.
That there was smoke in the room. Now, is this something that you're now saying you did not hear but were rather told by Dr. Oziel?
I don't believe I represented that I heard this. I was told this by Dr. Oziel, and also there's an inaccuracy here. Oziel did not say that they talked about the smell of the blood. He said they talked about the smell of the smoke.
All right, and you recalled specifically now sitting here today, 4 years later, that the word used was not blood but smoke. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Continuing on, in quotes. The cloud was very thick in the room, and that the residue was even there when the police arrived for the smell. End of quotes. Did you tell the police that?
I believe I did tell them that.
And is this something that's actually contained in the affidavit? It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. The defendant's told of eyes coming out of the socket and body tissue and
Your Honor,
blood.
I can object to that last sentence as hearsay. What she told police.
Are you referring now to what's in the affidavit? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, why don't you clarify that?
So, all right.
The court is dealing with this under section 356 of the evidence code based upon the direct examination of the witness. Go ahead.
Ms. Smith, at line 25 of page 19, the affidavit continues, the defendant's told of eyes coming out of the socket and body tissue and blood coming up onto the walls. Is that something that you
I'm
were...
sorry, where are you at? Page 19, line 25 does not say that.
The last word at line 25 on page 19 says the, is that the last word?
No.
All right, may I approach please and see what she's reading?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. On line 25, yes.
On line 25, the defendant told of eyes coming out of the socket and body tissue and blood coming up onto the walls. Now, is it your testimony here?
On line 26 of my document.
All right, now, and it goes over to page 20, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, is that something that was told to you or is that something that you heard?
That's something that was told to me.
Continuing on page 20, after they were sure they were
There
dead.
will be a continuing objection to everything the witness testified was told to her on the basis of this.
All right. Again, the court is treating this material under section 356 of the evidence code. It's brought out portions of it by the defense during the direct examination. You may continue.
After they were sure they were dead, they took off their clothes and placed them in plastic bags they had taken to the room for this purpose, knowing the event would be bloody and that they did not want to track blood in the house while changing clothes. Is it your testimony here today that this is not something that you overheard but was something that was told to you?
Oziel told me this.
Do you remember when it was that he told you that particular thing about taking the bag to the room?
I don't remember when, but I remember where we were.
Where were you?
We were driving on, I think, the 405 freeway towards the valley. It was night.
The affidavit goes on at line 9 on page 20. I believe the defendant stated that they showered before changing into clean clothes. Now, when you say I believe the defendant stated, was that something that you actually heard yourself or was that something that Dr. Oziel told you?
Something that Dr. Oziel told me.
And then it goes on, thereafter the bloody clothes were dumped into a dumpster somewhere in Beverly Hills. They then went to the wine and cheese tasting party. By this time, they were running behind their schedule and had to hurry. They did not have time to bury the guns, and the guns were kept in one of the cars. The guns were still in one of the cars when the police were there. It was not until later that they buried them off Mulholland. Is that something that you now say you did not overhear, but rather was told to
I
you?
never claimed to overhear this.
Well-
Oziel told me the details of the crime.
But Ms. Smith, in the affidavit that you signed under penalty of perjury at page 18, you indicated you heard a detailed description of the killings.
Well, I'm going to object to everything.
Sustained.
Okay. And Ms. Smith, is it not correct that page 18 of the affidavit contains a statement from you that you were listening to a conversation in Dr. Oziel's office and heard a detailed description?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
I have never claimed to have heard anything in entirety.
To the witness.
Objection overruled.
Okay, so
Did my objection hit the record, though?
I'm sure it did. That's fine. Hopefully the answer did also.
I have never claimed to hear anything in entirety. I've always said I only heard bits and pieces. always the blanks were filled in by Oziel, and I have no way of knowing the correctness or accuracy of what was filled in for me.
At page 20, line 24. The motive for the killings was their fear the father would not include them in the will. The father was constantly threatening the defendants that if they did not conform their conduct to the father's demands, they would be disinherited. As a result, they grew to hate the father. Is this something now that you're saying you did not overhear but was told to you? Is that correct?
Correct.
And you never heard anything of that kind. Is that correct?
Correct.
At page 21, line 11, does the affidavit contain the information that Dr. Oziel told me the details of the discussion after the defendants left? Is that in there? Line 11 and
Correct.
12? And is that was in the affidavit when you signed it, correct?
Correct.
As well as page 18, which indicated that you heard these things, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
As well as page 18, in which you said you overheard these things, correct?
Correct, but I don't know that I would have interpreted a line many pages away to include, things 10 pages away from that. And also, I continue to maintain that I always said I only heard bits and pieces. And, you don't understand.
Excuse me, there's no question pending, Your Honor. Would you ask the witness to stop answering?
Just ask your next question, please.
Okay, now, Ms. Smith, before you testified here on Friday on direct examination for Mr. Burt, did
So rude.
you discuss the fact with Mr. Burt or the other defense attorneys that you no longer remembered what it is you might have heard with your own ears? Did you discuss that fact with Mr. Burt?
Objection,
When?
calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Before you testified on Friday?
Yes, of course. I did tell them that.
All right, so you did tell them that the things contained in the affidavit were not...
No, I didn't read the affidavit. They did ask me a couple of questions about the affidavit, but they did not read me the affidavit, and I did not read the affidavit. They just asked me 1 or 2 points about it, and I told them then, that I did not know how to differentiate between what I really heard and what Oziel embedded in my consciousness that I heard.
And when you say they, who are you referring to?
The defense lawyer, Michael Burt, and I'm not sure if Leslie Abrams was in the room or not at the time. I don't believe she was.
Have you had discussions prior to testifying with Ms. Abramson about your testimony?
I wouldn't say we had really discussions about my testimony. They just asked me questions. But they didn't ask me about testimony. They just asked me to clarify answers for them.
Now, Ms. Smith, you've said quite a few things to discredit Dr. Oziel during your testimony here on direct and cross-examination. Is that correct?
Questions argumentative.
Sustained.
Ms. Smith, you have said many things about Dr. Oziel here today in front of the juries, correct?
Objection, argumentative and irrelevant.
Why don't you just ask the question, follow-up question here?
Ms. Smith, isn't it true that the reason you're saying these things about Dr. Oziel is because you were in love with him and he was married and he wouldn't divorce his wife and marry you? Isn't
No, that
true?
is not true at all.
But you wanted to marry Dr. Oziel at one time.
No, I did not, and I have proof of that. I have statements to other people long before. It was Dr. Oziel who wanted to marry me, not me marry him.
Do you remember telling the police that Dr. Oziel had even talked you out of having children? Do you remember telling the police that
Oh,
when you
yes.
talked to them?
Oziel knew I wanted to have children, and he lied to me, claiming that he tried to make himself be everything I wanted.
But you wanted to have children and you indicated that
I would not want children that looked like Dr. Oziel. So,
Ms. Smith, Dr. Oziel failed.
do not try to alter, what is real about my situation with Oziel.
Oh my God. Oh my God, I can't. That was great. That was great. People cannot contain themselves in the courtroom. It's awesome.
This was not a romance. It was not a...
Even the judge was laughing. Okay, come on. That was great. I give it to her. Judalon Smith has become my favorite so far in this trial.
relationship that stemmed out of meeting in a social environment and having a mutual attraction to one another. Dr. Oziel had his own plan and design as to what he wanted me to serve in his life. And I can provide you a great deal of proof to substantiate everything I say about Dr. Oziel. Dr. Oziel made tremendous effort to convince me that my mother was trying to kill me and poison me. He isolated me from every single person I knew.
All right, let's wait for the next question.
I would never marry Dr. Oziel. I told his own children when they asked me.
Ms.
Hold on,
Smith.
we'll wait for another question, okay?
Ms. Smith, you finally succeeded in doing what you wanted to do all along, which is to have a national forum to slander Dr. Oziel.
All right, it is argumentative. Rephrase the question.
Ms. Smith, isn't it true that your motivation in going to the police was not to solve the Menendez murder case, it was to get Dr. Oziel?
No, that is not true.
And isn't it true that you are now on national television being able to slander Dr. Oziel the way you've always wanted?
No, that is not what I've always wanted. I have wanted justice. I've wanted the police and the district attorney to do their job for everyone, not just for selected people.
I have nothing further to say.
All right, any redirect?
That was beautiful. Judalon Smith, wherever you are, I salute you. That was great. That was great. And way to hold your own on the stand. That was beautiful. And that's how you tell it. That's how you do it.
When you first went to the police back in March of 1990, your motivation at that time was to have Dr. Oziel arrested because of something he had done to you. Is that correct?
Because of crimes he had committed against me, yes.
And I think you referred to those crimes yesterday and indicated he had raped you and done other things to you. Is that right?
He had abducted me from my home. He had drugged me. He had forced me to stay in his home against my will. He had threatened my life.
Is that a motion to strike everything after the
Why did you feel as strongly as you did about going to the police on March 5th, 1990?
Objection in relation to
Because on the night that Jerry Oziel was strangling me and I was in the process of blacking out, I said to God that if I'm supposed to die now, let it be quick because this is painful. And if I'm not supposed to die, then I promise you, if you let me live, that this man will not be allowed to do this to anyone else. That I'll do everything within my power, within the law, to see that the truth is known about him and that he cannot continue to do this because I had knowledge that he had committed similar crimes against women before me.
And had you gotten that?
She's not the first, and she wouldn't be the last if she didn't try to stop him. I'm sure of it. We know he had dual relationships with his clients. He was also having sexual relations with his clients. And as we know now, he gaslights his clients. He lies to them. He drugs them against their will. He abducts them. He makes them fearful that their lives are going to be taken from them. Yeah, Oziel's the scary dude, and he's the one that should be in prison. That's my argument, and I'm sticking to it. I don't think the boys are any kind of threat to society anymore. I know they're not boys. I still call them the boys. But they are grown men. And I don't believe that they are a threat to society. I never really did. But Oziel is a clear threat to society, and he gets to walk around and do these things to his clients, women that he meets. He obviously has no respect for women. He's a disgusting pig. I'll just leave it at that.
Information about other women from him or from other sources, without getting into the details.
From him and his wife.
Objection.
Right, the answer will stand. Next question.
What's the question?
Because I had knowledge that he had committed similar crimes against women before me.
And had you gotten that information about other women from him or from other sources, without getting into the details?
From him and his wife.
Objection.
Right, the answer will stand. Next question.
And Ms. Smith, when you went to the police, you also felt that you had been the victim of a sexual assault. Isn't that true?
Yes, on 2 occasions he raped me.
And did you have in mind when you went to the police in March of 1990 that you were there primarily to provide the police with evidence concerning the Menendez case?
No.
Did you care at all about the Menendez case when you went to the police?
No, I didn't, other than telling them who committed those crimes. That was not my purpose in being there. My purpose in being there was to report the crimes against me.
Right. And were you given certain assurances, either by Mr. Al-Hadaf or someone else, that the police would follow up on your information concerning being raped and assaulted? And
I was told that Jerry Oziel would be arrested.
Well, this was brought out during the cross-examination.
And you were told Jerry Oziel would be arrested for the crimes he had committed against you?
Yes.
And were you told that the police would take a formal police report from you in which your allegations were detailed?
I believed that's what I was doing in the 7 hours that I was being recorded by the police, but they kept getting off onto the Menendez thing. And then it's like, I believed that I was.
They didn't listen to her. They didn't want to hear what she had to say. They were only using her to get to Oziel and to get to the testimony that they wanted to put the boys away. That's all that they were caring about right then and there. They didn't care about the assaults of women and the abuse of power that someone as a psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever he was, had. And it's disgusting.
I was reporting Oziel at that time.
And after you gave your initial information to the police on March 5th, 1990, did you ask whether a formal investigation was going to be undertaken concerning his crimes against you?
I later learned from someone.
That's not responsible. You ask the question.
It came to my attention.
Could I have the question reread, please?
After you gave your initial information, March 5th, 1990, did you ask whether a formal investigation was going to be undertaken concerning his crimes against you?
You answer yes or no.
It was represented to me that they were investigating the crimes against me.
All right, and was it represented to you in March of 1990?
I believed that it was from the beginning, yes.
And in fact, wasn't it the case that the police waited, or the district attorney waited until July of 1990 to initiate a formal investigation into your charges?
Objection called for your saying, lady.
Did you at some point in time complain to the district attorney's office that no one had taken a formal police report from you concerning the crimes that have been committed against you?
That's true.
And did someone indicate to you that they'd get around to it, or words to that effect?
They indicated to me that it was lost.
And did two Beverly Hills Police Department officers eventually come and take a police report from you concerning your charges against Dr. Oziel?
At a later date, I then had to go back in and go through the whole thing all over again and file, this time, another complaint.
Right, and were you aware that the officers who
I guess since they never filed the first one, it wasn't another, but it was.
Were you aware that the officers who took that complaint wrote in their report that Smyth documented much of the previously described situations and incidents?
Pardon me, I think
Concern-
that's what you're saying.
Well, this goes to her state of mind, Your Honor, being informed of this and the reasons for her anger at the district attorney's office, which
All right.
were brought out and redirected.
Yeah, so we're getting into extreme and serious matters at this point.
I have an exhibit. I believe, defendant's next in order. 6-page document.
So we have 352. Yes.
This is showing you exhibit number 352. Is this a police report which became familiar to you at some point in time concerning your charges against Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And from the date of that police report, is that a police report which was not taken until July of 1990?
That's correct.
Had you been provided with a copy of that police report at some point in time?
No, I had to retain an attorney to get one.
And your attorney retained a copy of it?
Correct.
And did you read that police report at some point in time before you testified to today?
I have read it only once. It made me so upset that I couldn't ever read it again.
Right. You said at some point that you were upset at the district attorney's office, and the reason you said you were upset was because of all the behind-the-scenes things that were happening. What did you mean by that?
Objection called for your speculation.
Overruled.
I prefer not to get into the details of that here, but I
Okay, then let's ask another
distrust
question.
them.
Without getting into the details, why did you distrust them?
Because I know that Ms. Bazanich would lie, knowing that I would tell the truth, that she said that she would deny something she said to me and that she would make me out to be a liar if I repeated it.
Ms. Bazanich, the attorney on the prosecution side, the female with the big bows, Ms. Bazanich would twist her words and make her out to be a liar, she says.
What was it you were not supposed to repeat?
Excuse me, Your Honor. May we approach, please?
You know the day I'm talking about.
All right, you may approach me.
Oh, did you guys just see that? Oh, God. Okay, so Pam Bazanich is like, what? Excuse me, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she's like, you know what day I'm talking about. Let's see that again. That was really entertaining. I'm sorry. This is great.
I
Okay, then let's ask another
distrust
question.
them.
Without getting into the details, why did you distrust them?
Because I know that Ms. Bazanich would lie, knowing that I would tell the truth, that she said that she would deny something she said to me and that she would make me out to be a liar if I repeated it.
And what was it you were not supposed to repeat?
Excuse me, Your Honor. May we approach, please?
You know the day I'm talking about.
All right, you may approach me. All right,
Ms. Bazanich told her, if you don't say what I want you to say, I'm going to call you out to be a liar, basically.
everybody go? Okay. All the jurors are back, and we'll resume with the questioning of the witness. The last two questions and answers given by the witness are stricken, and the juries are admonished to disregard them. All right, you may proceed.
Ms. Smyth, you indicated on cross-examination that you were upset at the district attorney's office. Is that correct?
Upset, disappointed, shocked.
And were there factors other than the fact that they rejected the rape charges that you had made against Dr. Oziel that caused you to be upset with the office, without getting into what those other factors are?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you were asked on cross-examination questions about letters that you had written to Dr. Oziel at various points in time, correct?
I'm sorry, I heard.
You were asked on cross-examination about various letters you had written to Dr. Oziel at various points in time.
Yes.
And I think you also indicated on cross-examination that Dr. Oziel would put words, would suggest things or manipulate you to say things that you didn't want to say at various points in time?
That, and there were other things he did too, in the same respect to that.
In reference to writing these letters, did he have a bag full of letters that he would show you and tell you, this is the way you write to me and express your love?
He had a huge, like one of those leaf bag, a big garbage bag type thing, filled with letters that are identical to the letters that have been produced with my handwriting. They had different handwriting. So they were from different women, but they were all the same words, essentially.
And would he use those letters from other women to instruct you on how you should express your love for him?
Yes, he did.
And would you follow his instructions?
What a weird sicko. He's got a trash bag full of all these love letters from women that he makes them write to him. What a weirdo.
Yes.
At the time you met him and throughout the course of your relationship, did you feel you were easily suggestible?
I was extremely suggestible.
Vulnerable to a certain extent?
Very much so.
And did the fact that Dr. Oziel was a doctor have anything to do with how much influence, if any, he had on you and how you behaved and what you believed?
Completely.
Why did the fact that he was a doctor influence you in your dealings with him in terms of being influenced by what he said and did?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
It's a position of power. People try to trust their doctors. That you think, oh, okay, you went to the school, you know everything, so obviously, you're the doctor, so I'll just trust you. And you guys should always trust your own instincts. Never listen to a doctor, a therapist, or a medical doctor, or anybody. If they're telling you something that you don't believe or you know in your heart to be true, go the other way, because you need to be your own advocate.
Now, you've testified repeatedly on cross-examination that you can in your own mind distinguish between what Dr. Oziel told you and what you overheard at various points in time when you were listening in on sessions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you know now that do you have personal knowledge now that you were present on October 31st for the session with the Menendez brothers?
Yes.
And you have a recollection now that you were present on November 2nd and overheard something on that date as well?
Yes.
Do you have recollection of being present at any other sessions?
All the others, I'm not sure about. I don't even know if they really did happen or if he just told me they did.
And when you first met with the police and the district attorney's office on March 7th for your tape-recorded statement, was what you told the police then in your words? In other words, was Mr. Al-Hadaf telling you the way it was, the way Dr. Oziel was telling you you were suicidal on the tape we played yesterday, or was it pretty much your own words on March 7th when you met with the police?
I don't quite know how to answer that other than when I first started listening to those tapes, those interviews, and this was back in 1990, I didn't know that, it seemed like this isn't me. In fact, it was so disturbing that I couldn't transcribe the tapes. I paid someone else to transcribe them because I talked very fast, which I'm not usually a fast talker, and I used words that bothered me. Some of my own personal history was personal history that wasn't true that I was giving. It was personal history that Oziel had projected onto me. It was very hard for me to listen to those tapes because I didn't feel
like he planted a lot of false memories in her.
Like it was me.
Right, but at some point in time, isn't it true that the district attorney and the police became very interested in what it was that Dr. Oziel told you, as opposed to what you heard?
Yes.
And I have a tape of it where the defendant's next to me.
353.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you know what the tape is, please?
Yes, why don't you discuss it with the prosecutor?
Smyth, I'm going to play you a portion of the March 7th, 1990 interview with Detective Zoller and Mr. Al-Hadaf, and then I'm going to ask you a question about it.
Agree that we wouldn't have children, because prior to that he was saying that we could have children, even though he hadn't wanted the children he had with Laurel, that since I was a different personality than he was, because his reason for not wanting the kids was that there wasn't enough emotional dynamics, that she wasn't a spicy enough person or a energetic enough person to be able to give attention to the children and attention to him, and he demands constant attention. And so, but I'm like a very lively, real active, real accomplishing person. I'm like an overachiever, which she is not. So, and I
Judalon, Do we get to a third meeting?
Yes. So anyway, finally, over that weekend, which I still didn't get sleep because he put me through a whole other emotional turmoil.
I can understand that.
Abandon me
Do
to
we
the boys.
get to a third meeting?
The next meeting with the boys, I can't remember exactly when, but we do get another meeting. He does come to another meeting with the boys.
Does he tell you about it?
And I can't remember about this because now my memory with the boys and meetings becomes real sketchy.
I want you to work on that one.
Because I'm on more medication, I'm having less sleep, I'm more and more frightened, not only about the boys, but that what's going to happen if Jerry abandons me.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Do you recall any more meetings with the boys?
If I sit down and go through my book
Then maybe.
with dates and things like that, possibly.
Do you recall Jerry telling you anything that the boys tell him?
Instead of trying to give you the dates, I'll tell you exactly just what I know.
That's it.
And where it fits in on the dates and the time schedule, I'm bad about because at this point I'm really on medication.
Let me show you the reason why I'm asking you this.
Which I'm not on at this time. I quit, I'm not taking it.
The reason I'm asking you this is that what's going to happen is this. We may or may not get the tapes back. We'll talk to you about that in a minute. If we don't get the tapes back, then we're going to be asking Jerry certain questions. Jerry's going to say, I don't know anything about that. They either did say that or they didn't say that, or what they said was this, what they said was something else, okay? If he says something that is inconsistent in what you're telling us, then we want to know what it is so that you can testify essentially as to what it is that he really said. That's the reason why it's important that we have this down.
I doubt that he would tell you anything differently because he told Laurel the same things, he told me the same things.
That's fine. Then we can always ask Laurel as well to corroborate what you're going to say.
Yeah. The only problem with her is if he doesn't want her to say something, she won't.
I'll tell you something, Judalon. I think that you believe that she is more under his control than she really is. I think that she is a woman of her own will. And I think we're going to find that out. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What is it that she said, that he tells you anyway, that they say?
So the next main thing was to get the boys to realize that he was their ally. And so this is where the whole thing came in about Jose being physically and emotionally abusive to Kitty and to the boys, and over-domineering and overly critical, and in essence what Jerry described was himself. I mean, that's exactly the person that he described. That Jose, had this control over the whole family, that he was so dominating and domineering and had so much power that he could get everyone in the family to do what he wanted them to do. And even though he was physically beating and abusing Kitty, that she would never report him or ever let anyone know. Now, what Les Summerfield knows or not about that, I don't know, because Les did not break confidentiality at any time.
I don't know if Oziel knew about the SA that was going on with Eric and previously with Lyle, but he knew about the controlling and manipulative behaviors of Jose, and obviously that he was willing to hit his wife, but I don't know if he knew the extent of what he was doing to Eric and Lyle.
Did you get this impression of what Kitty was like from Jerry? And of what Jose was like from Jerry?
Yes.
Okay. You don't really know whether or not
I don't
he was
know, because I
actually
never
physically
met
abusive.
Kitty or Jose.
Is this what he's saying the boys told him, or is this what he's saying Kitty told him?
he's saying that this is what he knows from having known them.
The boys.
No. He
Jose
said
and
that
Kitty.
he knew Kitty on stage. Whether he really did, I don't know. Whether this is all manufactured to help the boys, I don't know. Whether less, because one psychologist to another, I guess, can tell those things if there's related things. So since the boys were in therapy with Jerry for Calabasas, they weren't in therapy, that was the way to get them off. So,
Were you aware that the maid was interviewed and she said there was absolutely nothing abnormal with the relationship between the husband and wife? She was there 5 days a week, essentially.
no, I wasn't aware of
Does
that.
that suggest to you maybe that Jose wasn't abusive? And there's
Possibly, because I think that Jerry's housekeeper who comes in 5 days a week from, 10 in the morning till 7:30 at night, I think she would be able to collaborate some of Laurel, not physical abuse, but at least the emotional intimidation and getting mad at her for stupid little nothing things.
Oh,
And
you think so?
I think so.
Jose was like that?
Oh, no, I think that Jerry's housekeeper would say that about Jerry. I think that she would be able to, even though she doesn't have a full picture and he never really did any big number on us in front of her, I think she has a little sense enough of it.
Did you get
To
the
know
impression
that.
at all
So,
that the boys ever said, well,
I don't believe, to be honest, I don't believe that there was the physical abuse.
okay. Let me ask you this now, because I think we've gotten as much from the conversation about the boys that we could possibly get, unless there's something else that Jerry tells you that the boys said that you haven't told us already. Anything? You go through this on your notes, and
Well,
Charles.
when I stay in order of things, it's easier for
Okay.
me. When I stay in the chronological order
Yeah.
of how things happen, because what I'm doing is I'm just taking out of my memory.
And I know a lot of what you're saying triggers other things that are going on.
Yeah, and so when
Okay.
I take things out of context,
Yeah.
then the fact that I went through so much sleep deprivation, and I mean, other people can verify to you, I've lost a lot of weight. I mean, I was not a heavy person before, but I mean, I was at least 15 pounds heavier. And on a small person like me,
That's a lot of weight. 15 pounds.
15 pounds,
To make a big difference.
everyone is noticing the big difference. And I also did have to go out and spend a lot of money to get a new wardrobe, because a lot of my clothes are like around the waist, 3-4 inches too big. So,
When you go back home, though, I would like you to try to recall.
so I
as
will
much as
try
you can,
to
just
put
see if
things.
it's possibly be. Is there something we left out?
Well, you mentioned last night about, about Jerry telling you what the boys told him.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the confession yet. They're real, when they put the confession on table, we got to on tape.
So
The
was that-
first confession was just Eric confessing. Okay. The second confession was after Newport Beach, and the boys came back in, and Jerry had convinced them, and he used my tape recorder, which is still in his possession, along with a couple of other things, one of which I would really like.
Regular tape recorder or a micro?
A tape recorder, a little Sanyo portable.
Okay, it's a regular cassette.
Yeah, regular cassette deck. So, and he still has my tape recorder in his possession. And I was there because he had, actually, originally, he wanted me, he was going to try to record their confession without them knowing it. So I was trying, because that's my business, even though I don't know how to bug things. I'm not a detective. I do record live seminars and things like that. So I have the equipment. We were then going to try to figure out a way that I could be in the next room and record them, the session, without them knowing, though. But I felt it was much too dangerous. And I would have done it. I would have done it.
But you didn't.
But
So
I didn't do the recording. Instead, we decided that it wouldn't be really valuable or legal if they were recorded unknowingly, right?
depends.
So Jerry decided that the boys needed to agree to be tape recorded.
Okay.
So they came in and agreed to be tape recorded, and the way he got them to agree to be tape recorded was that if they got caught, which they're, even without him breathing a word was a possibility, he wanted them to still feel fear of being caught.
So they were aware that those tape recordings could be made aware to a third person. That sounds like they're waiving the confidentiality just for that. That's beautiful. This is fantastic.
That does not sound like they're waiving their confidentiality for that. I am livid. I'm so mad. That doesn't mean that anything on that tape is for anybody to listen to.
Jesus.
So
I imagine all of that is on tape. You're right.
I'm sure Jerry really protects himself a lot. I mean, he made me sign stuff.
But he coerced the boys into recording it. So how good is that then? If you coerce or manipulate the boys into having a reason to record a confession. I can't with this. Oziel, I feel like he needs to be in prison. I can't. My head's spinning.
To try to protect himself.
Okay, so they decided to go ahead and be recorded.
Yeah.
So they went ahead and agreed to be recorded.
Good.
And gave all the details from every minute what happened. And rather than go through twice bits and pieces that I overheard and what Jerry told me, I'll just give you the scenario of went down
Fabulous.
as I know it.
And it was
Okay.
both contributed by both of them. Rather
Yes.
than individual.
And rather than be repetitive and try
Sure.
to decipher and remember,
So he said this and he
what
said
I
that.
overheard and what was told to me by Jerry, and whatever, I'll just tell you the scenario, and then that way, whatever parts of that puzzle it
We can
fills
take
in
care
for
of it later.
you, that'll help.
We'll take care of it.
The scenario was, and I believe it was 2 weeks prior to the murder, they made an excuse. On the tape, they even say what the excuse is, I believe. They made an excuse, and they drove to San Diego. They had false ID, and they...
All right, Ms. Smith, I've stopped the tape at the point in time where you're starting to describe the confession, which you've indicated to the officers is a contribution of things you overheard and things that were told you by Jerry Oziel. And is it true that after the point in time when I stopped the tape, you then go through and detail almost word for word the information which was read to you by Ms. Bazanich in your affidavit of June 8, 1990?
Yes.
In other words, if I was to play that tape, it would essentially be you repeating
Those details.
the details of the confession which were read to you on cross-examination and which Ms. Bazanich read to you beginning on page 18 of the affidavit of June 8, 1990, where it's written in the affidavit, 2 weeks before the murder, they made an excuse and drove to San Diego with some false identification, and then it goes on into other details, correct?
Correct.
Including the details I read to you on direct examination concerning the facts of the crime with the eyeballs being shot out, all those facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's on the tape in the portion that I didn't play.
Correct.
All right. Now, when you were talking to the police and to the district attorney on March 7th, they indicated to you just before you went into the details why it was important for them to get from you what Jerry Oziel was saying to you, correct?
Yes.
And that was a portion of the tape where Mr. Al-Hadaf is explaining why he wanted to know what Oziel told you when he said, the reason I'm asking you this is that what's going to happen is this. We may or may not get the tapes back. We'll talk to you about that in a minute. If we don't get the tapes back, then we're going to be asking Jerry certain questions. Jerry's going to say, I don't know anything about that. Either they did say that or they didn't say it. If he says something that is inconsistent with what you're telling us, then we want to know what it is so that you can testify essentially as to what it is he really said. So they're explaining to you why it's important that they get from you what Oziel told you, correct?
Yes.
Sustain that portion, that answer, sir.
And later on in the portion that was played for you, you indicate just before you're going into the details of the confession, you say to the police, so they went ahead and agreed to be tape recorded and gave all the details from every minute. And rather than go through twice bits and pieces that I overheard and what Jerry told me, I'll just give you the scenario of what went down as I know it. And then Mr. Al-Hadaf says...
Well, haven't we just heard this on a tape?
I just want
to repeat it again.
Tape is not all that clear on that point. I want to ask a follow-up.
It was clear as day, clear as a bell.
And at that point, you indicated to the police quite clearly that the scenario you were giving them was not of your own personal knowledge, but rather a mixture of the bits and pieces you had picked up to the point in time when you were making the statement to the police, and all the information you would repeatedly receive from Oziel up to that point in time, correct?
Judge, in this case, the tape.
Sustained.
That's why I was trying to read the tape, so I can clarify this. But
Well, it's all there.
Is that what you were referring to when you said to them, and rather than be repetitive and try to remember, decipher and remember what I overheard and what was told to me by Jerry, I'll just tell you the scenario?
I was not present at the December 11th meeting, so I could not have overheard anything on December 11th. So when I was saying to them, I was referring to, when I was saying the things that I overheard, I was referring to the things that had previously occurred that I had overheard. And, you know, what then I was told by Oziel, not having to go through each thing because I didn't know what was going to, exactly come up.
Right, but the point is you made clear to Mr. Al-Hadaf that what you were telling him was a mixture of the bits and pieces that
I believed I was making it clear to him.
All right, and then the next thing that happened in time is Mr. Al-Hadaf or someone in his office prepared this affidavit for your signature, correct?
Correct.
Objection to the formal question, the next thing that happened.
Sustain the answer, sir.
You gave the interview in March to the police that I just played for you, right?
Correct.
And then in June you were presented with this affidavit which was read to you on direct and cross-examination, correct?
And prepared by a third party.
And in the affidavit at page 18, it says, while I was in the next office listening to the conversation in Dr. Oziel's office with the defendant, I heard a detailed description of the killings was given by the defendants, which included the following. And then the affidavit sets forth the exact same facts, which you were about to repeat on the tape there, right?
Yes.
So in your own words, on March 7th, you're indicating to them quite clearly this, what you're telling them, the scenario you're telling them is not of your own personal knowledge necessarily. And in the affidavit, whoever prepared this affidavit has transformed this into, this is what you personally heard.
Objection.
That's true.
This takes the testimony is compounded at the meeting.
It's argumentative. Objection sustained. The answer, sir.
When you read this affidavit before you were signing it, did you focus on the fact that this paragraph indicated that you were personally aware of the facts which are detailed in here as opposed to being told the certain facts by Dr. Oziel?
No, I was focused more on the facts that they were going to use, not on the surrounding information.
Did you think, based on your conversation with the police that I just played for you, that the district attorney and the police department thought it was important whether it was heard from Dr. Oziel or whether you personally heard it?
I would say they thought that it was important regardless of who heard it or how they came by it. They just felt it was important to know that information.
In other words, you told them in that portion I played for you that you were going to give them a mix of what you had heard and the bits and pieces you would listen to yourself, and no one at that point said to you, no, we just want to hear what you heard, did they?
That's correct.
And in fact, the first fact you told to the police was that 2 weeks before the murder, they drove to San Diego and with some false identification purchased shotguns, right?
Objection vague is the first fact.
Well, again, we've just heard the tape played, so let's not repeat things.
Remember at some point, whether it's the first thing you said or at some point in the portion I just played for you, that you told them that 2 weeks before the murder, they drove to San Diego and purchased shotguns.
Yes.
Are you now aware that the shotguns were purchased on August 18th and the killings took place on August 20th?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, ever hear anybody say that 2 weeks before the killings, somebody went to San Diego and purchased shotguns?
Oziel.
You never heard the Menendez brothers say that, though, correct?
No.
No.
So Oziel's version is a little bit different than the truth, huh? But that's the version that she's been repeating because that's the one she knows. So that's pretty telling there.
You also asked about the fact that you did not tell the police that Oziel was your therapist when you spoke with them on March 7th. And
That's
that
true.
You did not answer truthfully concerning your initial business contact with Dr. Oziel, correct?
Well, they're two different things.
All right. You said there was a reason why you didn't tell the police that Dr. Oziel was your therapist, correct?
That's correct.
What was the reason?
Because on several of the occasions when I told Oziel that we should go to the police, or that I would go to the police, then he said that, number one, the Menendez brothers owned the police, so the minute that anyone went to the police and told them anything about them, that the Menendez family would get a phone call and I would be dead in 2 minutes. The second thing that he told me about going to the police was that the moment that I went to the police and told them that the contact that I had with him was that he was my doctor and my therapist, that they would call him up to check if I was crazy or not, and that he would tell them that I in fact had escaped from his care and that he was trying to find me to put me in a mental hospital.
All right, and do you remember the...
My God. Oh my God. He threatened to put her in a mental institution for not going along with his narrative. I'm appalled and disgusted. And this is why people like this should never have positions of power. Narcissists and manipulative, controlling pieces of crap should not have positions of power, especially when they can prey on innocent victims.
Portion of the March 17th telephone conversation I played for you where Dr. Oziel was trying to convince you that you were suicidal?
Yes.
Do you remember on that tape Dr. Oziel in his own voice saying to you that they were going to put you in a state mental institution?
Yes, he did.
And were those statements that he made to you during the period of time that you were living with him, that if you left the house he was going to put you in a state mental institution?
That was one of the initial threats.
And is he also on the body wire tape and also on the March 17th tape making statements to you on tape about how the Menendez brothers, the police were no protection for you in this, and that they could control the police, essentially?
That's correct.
Now, you said the other thing you told the detective that wasn't accurate was, or you characterized it as a lie, was your initial business contacts with him?
Yes, that wasn't really a lie. That was early on. Oziel, I don't want to go into the details of the incident that caused this, but early on there was an incident. I have many friends who are therapists and psychologists, and when he discovered this, he got very concerned and said that I had to be very careful not to let anyone know that that was the way that our relationship began, because it would look very bad for me, and people would not have respect for me, and people would not take me as being credible, and that for my benefit, that it would be best if we gave people the picture that our relationship began and developed out of a business relationship.
And later on, in one of the tapes I played for you, which was made after there was some publicity in the case, Dr. Oziel's voice is on tape telling you that you want to have no comment to the press and that there are certain irrelevant facts that don't need to be disclosed, and that if you did disclose them, things would be uncomfortable for you, correct?
Yes, he did.
And was that similar to what he was telling you in regard to how you first met? That you shouldn't really reveal how the two of you first met?
Yes.
Was one of the reasons you first met Dr. Oziel having something to do with his expertise in something called neuro-linguistic programming? Was that how you initially made the phone call to his therapy center? Because you had heard a tape about some suggestion technique called neuro-linguistic programming?
Yes. I should probably clarify something about this.
Okay, let's go on to something else.
And were you given a telephone number to call about that, which connected you with Dr. Oziel?
I called information and got a phone number, which was Oziel's, and it was actually the real people I was trying to contact were different.
You were asked on cross-examination whether your testimony was that Dr. Oziel was never in fear, and you said that was your testimony, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember on one of the tapes I played for you yesterday that you asked Dr. Oziel the question, I don't think you're afraid of the boys, and Dr. Oziel answered, I'm not afraid of anybody, or words to that effect?
Yep.
Sustained.
You said that you did overhear Lyle Menendez say something threatening to his brother, correct?
Yes.
What was the tone that he was using? Was it a figure of speech kind of threat, like I'll kill you if you walk out the door right now, or was it a real threat? How would you characterize it?
Well, I think he was caught off guard, and he was surprised, and he was upset and saying a lot of things. And
Sustained, the answer is correct.
Can you characterize it in terms of whether it appeared to you was an offhanded comment, or whether he was expressing a real threat?
That's so hard for me to decipher still because of the programming Oziel gave me about it.
If you can't, that...
I can't.
Fine.
I don't honestly know.
Now, you were read... I think you indicated the incident in the elevator when Lyle was leaving, your impression was that he was concerned for Eric.
Yes.
And did you hear anything while he was still in session with Dr. Oziel that indicated that Lyle was concerned for Eric?
No.
And what did you hear at the elevator that made you think that Lyle was concerned for Eric at that point?
He just seemed to have an urgency to leave, and they were talking about Eric.
Anything else?
I just can't think of the exact dialogue that happened at that moment right now.
You talked about your motivation for revealing to the primetime announcer information concerning Dr. Oziel, correct?
Correct.
And I think you indicated that you were motivated by your fear of Dr. Oziel at that point, in part?
Correct.
Right. Did you also, in addition to the statements that Ms. Bazanich read to you, make other statements concerning your fear of Dr. Oziel and his dangerousness on a program which was broadcast sometime later after the show that she referred to?
Yes, there was another airing of clips from the same interview.
And that was part of the same interview that Ms. Bazanich referred to, where you were making statements about the Menendez brothers, correct?
Correct.
And do you remember saying during that interview concerning Oziel, he threatened to have me put in a mental hospital?
Yes.
Do you remember saying he was choking me and pulling my hair and I was trying to get away?
No, that was not me. That was another victim of his.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Move this so I can engage ourselves.
All right, everything after no is stricken.
Do you remember saying the look in his face was scary?
I believe I said that, but it was also said by one other victim.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Could I speak back to the answer the first one?
All right, everything after
Well, some of the things I
objection
said.
sustained as to the last answer, the answer is stricken.
Do you remember saying Jerry Oziel was not the person that he pretended to be?
Yes.
Do you remember saying every time that I wanted to leave, he would say that he would have Lyle and Eric kill me? Jerry said that he would paint this picture of me being this crazy lunatic woman, that he would deny absolutely everything.
Yes.
And do you remember saying, and he wanted to proceed to treat me with what he claims were antidepressants?
Yes.
Do you remember saying that in reference,
Pardon me, this is the unspoken.
All right, sustained.
in reference to Dr. Oziel implanting suggestions in your mind? Do you remember saying during your interview that in reference to the March 19th body wire tape and Dr. Oziel's repetition of the word thorns, that he was exercising a kind of mind control on you and repeating those words?
Sustained.
Do you remember saying to Diane Sawyer that this man is wrong and he's doing things that are horrible and harmful and destructive to people?
Objection. Call for hearsay.
Let's go to the reason she went to the prime time.
Well, we haven't heard that. This is just stuff that you say she said. It has nothing to do with her reason. Objection sustained.
Well, you testified your reason was your fear of Dr. Oziel, correct?
Correct.
Did you make certain statements during
Let's not lead the witness.
you had a fear of Dr. Oziel, and that was the reason you participated in an interview with the primetime people?
Yes.
And because you had that fear, did you make certain statements on that program in order to carry out your intentions of protecting yourself?
Objection.
Yes.
Overrule that answer will stand.
And what statements did you make that you thought?
Objection sustained as to what was said. Under section 352.
You mentioned on cross-examination that Dr. Oziel had told you your mother was trying to kill you?
Yes, he did.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
And you mentioned on cross-examination you were asked whether you had presently recovered from the trauma of being involved with Dr. Oziel, and you indicated that he had assaulted you just recently, correct?
Yes, he did.
And when did he assault you?
October 26th. October 26th.
And did he physically assault you?
Yes, he physically assaulted me. I think it's called sexual battery is the technical term.
Did he make some sort of sexual remark when he assaulted you?
There was a sexual remark, and he had an erection that he pressed against me.
That's all I have for you.
Is there examination by the counsel?
Yes.
How long will that be?
Very long.
All right. Well, let's see if we can complete it then. Unless somebody needs to take a break. Anybody?
Yeah, I need
One,
to break.
2, 3, okay, 4, okay. All right, we'll take a break then. Let's resume at 20 minutes to the hour. Let's make it promptly 22 so we can finish this witness.
Do you recall a time when you and Dr. Oziel went to your tape duplication business and copied tapes that he told you referred to the Menendez brothers?
Objection. The unspoken.
Overruled.
Yes.
And do you remember whether or not you were already a resident in his house at that time?
I'm not sure if I was actually residing in the house at that time. It was mid to late December when the copies were made.
So it was close in time to when he
It was close in time to when he took me to his house.
talked you into living in his house. And I believe you've testified that you duplicated all of the tapes that he brought to your business that night.
Overruled.
Correct.
And was one of the tapes that he brought to your business that night the tape that you are talking about to Mr. Al-Hadaf, the DA, and Detective Zoller, in that portion of your interview that Mr. Burt played for you before the break?
Yes.
And that tape was the so-called confession tape, correct?
Correct.
That is a tape that you understood had the actual voices of Eric and Lyle Menendez and Dr. Oziel on it.
Correct.
Objection sustained. The answer stricken.
Was that a tape that had the actual voices of the Menendez brothers and Dr. Oziel on it?
I didn't hear the tape, but that's how it was represented to me.
And was it your understanding that that tape was created on December 11th, 1989?
Correct.
And are you certain that you were not present when that tape was created?
I'm very certain that I was not present on December 11th.
And when I say present, do you understand that to mean you were not anywhere near Dr. Oziel's office when that was happening?
I was nowhere near Dr. Oziel's office when that happened.
And do you recall that you spoke to Dr. Oziel late that night of December 11th, and he represented to you that the session with the Menendez brothers had finally ended?
That's correct.
And was it your understanding in talking to Dr. Oziel that he met with the Menendez brothers that day for many, many hours?
Yes, I believe the meeting was set to begin at 4.
And I think you testified he called you around midnight to tell you it was just
Counsel,
over.
let's not leave this.
Do you remember when he called you to tell you it was over?
Overruled.
I believe it was close to midnight by the time he called me back.
And did he ultimately show you the tape that contained the voices of Eric and Lyle Menendez and himself from December 11th?
The only time I saw the tape was when we took it to my business to make a copy of it.
And how many copies of it did you make?
I believe there were 4 copies of each thing.
And was this one of the things?
Yes.
And do you recall how long that particular tape was? In other words, was it a 60-minute tape, a 90-minute tape, a 120, a 30?
That particular one, I'm not sure, but none of the tapes were all on.
Answer the question.
You're not sure how long that particular one was?
Correct.
When you were duplicating that particular tape, did you spot listen at all to check that it was copying properly?
After the copying, then I would stick the copies in the machine and fast forward and then hit play for 2 seconds to hear that there was a signal, and then I would turn it off and check the next one.
Would you hear any voices when you did that?
I would hear whatever would be on the spot that I randomly picked.
And do you recall, with respect to that particular tape, the tape of December 11th, when you spot checked it, did you hear anyone's voice?
I believe I heard Lyle's voice on maybe 1 or 2 of the checks.
And that would be 1 or 2 of the checks of that particular tape?
Yes.
To the best of your recollection, with respect to all the other tapes that you duplicated, did they contain only the voice of Dr. Oziel?
Again, I did not hear the content of the other tapes, but it was represented to me by Dr. Oziel that only his voice was on the other tapes. And when I spot checked the other tapes, it was only Oziel's voice I heard.
Now, although you never listened to that tape of December 11th, did Dr. Oziel represent to you what was on it?
Yes, he did.
Now, in the interview that you gave to Detective Zoller and Mr. Al-Hadaf, that portion of the interview that Mr. Burt played the introduction to, do you recall you went on to give them every single detail that you could recall about what the Menendez brothers supposedly told Dr. Oziel?
Correct.
And was it your understanding that every single one of those details was on the tape of 12/11?
Oziel represented to me that all those details were on the December 11th tape, and I represented to the police and Mr. Al-Hadaf that that's what was on the tape.
And that's the tape you were referring to, the actual tape with their voices?
Correct.
Now, I think you've testified that Dr. Oziel repeated these details to you frequently.
Frequently is to put it mild.
Many times. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when he would tell you particularly what he claimed were the details of the actual shootings, did he seem frightened?
Well, again, it would depend on my tone. If I didn't seem frightened enough, then he exerted more fear behavior.
Now, did you ask him to repeat these details to you?
No, in fact, I began having terrible nightmares and
All right,
said
you've
that
answered the question. You said no. Next question.
Did you ever protest his giving you these details, telling him, I don't want to hear this, why do I have to hear this?
Yes, I did.
And what reason would he give for having to tell you these things, repeat these gruesome details to you over and over?
He would laugh and make some joke about me, or he would just treat it very lightly and like something was wrong with me.
Now, Ms. Smyth, to this day, have you heard that tape of December 11th in order to determine whether or not what Dr. Oziel told you was on that tape, in fact, was on the tape?
No, I've never heard the tape.
Are you aware of the fact that one of the juries in this courtroom has heard that tape and that the other one is about to?
Your Honor, that's argument.
Sustained.
Did you, let's strike that, are you aware of some of Dr. Oziel's testimony in this case?
Objection relevant to the
Sustained.
episode.
You have testified that Dr. Oziel claimed to you that these specific details that were contained in that affidavit that Mrs. Bozanich read to you were on the December 11th tape, correct?
Correct.
Sustained. The answer stricken.
Do you know if Dr. Oziel himself testified that those specific details were told to him?
Your Honor, I would second that as a single fact not necessary.
Calls for an opinion by the witness. Objection sustained.
Well, I'm asking you if you have heard, did you hear or see any
It's
of
still
his
irrelevant. What you might have seen or heard.
It's just foundational.
It's irrelevant.
During the time that you knew Dr. Oziel, did you form an opinion as to whether or not he was a basically honest or dishonest person?
I'm very familiar with his pattern of lying and how he takes a grain of truth
Objection
and
sustained.
builds the
Objection is
lies around
sustained.
it.
The answer is stricken. Is non-responsive.
Okay, I would like.
That sounds like something a narcissist would do. Take a little grain of truth and sprinkle all their own little things around it.
Time that you knew Dr. Oziel, did you form an opinion as to whether or not he was a basically honest or dishonest person?
I'm very familiar with his pattern of lying and how he takes a grain of truth
Objection
and builds
sustained.
the
Objection is
lies around
sustained.
it.
The answer is stricken. Is non-responsive.
Okay, I would like you to answer just the question I'm asking, okay?
I'm sorry.
All right. Did you form an opinion based on your frequent contacts with Dr. Oziel on the issue of whether or not he is a basically honest or dishonest person?
Objection to the honest.
Overruled. You can answer yes or no.
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
He doesn't tell the truth unless it serves his purpose, and he takes a grain of truth and he builds around it the fantasy or the whatever it is he wants to believe or create. He's an extremely dishonest person.
All right, you've answered the question.
And were you in a position, well, strike that. Does he have a pattern for creating lies around a grain of truth?
Yes, he does.
Sustained. The answer stricken.
Did you observe him over the months that you knew him in situations where you knew, based on your own personal experience, that he was lying about things?
Yes.
And in telling these lies, would he characteristically build around a small grain of truth?
Yes.
Objection calls for a proper opinion.
Objection sustained. The answer stricken.
As a matter of fact, did you observe him do that? Take a small piece of truth and then tell lies to expand
All
upon
right, the
it?
objection is sustained. You've already gone into this. You've had her,
Haven't gotten an
you've
answer that
gotten her
remained on the
opinion.
record yet.
You've already had her opinion as to what her opinion is.
Do you, was it your experience that Dr. Oziel would lie to you?
He lied to me a great deal.
And in lying to you, did you discover that he would frequently build on a grain of
All
truth?
right, we've already gone through that. Let's go on to something else.
Mr. Al-Hadif, we'll strike that. Do you recall during the interview that you had with Detective Zoller and Mr. Al-Hadif on March 6, 1990, that in addition to telling them that you really didn't know what you heard versus what Dr. Oziel told you, do you recall telling them that as to some of the facts that you believe occurred, that you were speculating?
Yes, I believe I did.
And specifically, do you recall discussing with them the notion that the Menendez brothers changed their clothes in the room where the shooting occurred and telling the detective and the district attorney, but that is speculation on my part?
Excuse me, could we have a page in line?
5930. There's no lines, it's a big paragraph. Do you recall telling them that you were speculating?
Yes.
And do you know if when they drafted that affidavit that they asked you to sign, whether they included in there things that you clearly told them you speculated about?
Yes, there are things in the affidavit that were my speculation or were told to me.
And in the affidavit, are those things that are your speculation represented as either things you heard yourself or were told by Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And did you tell them during the interview of March 6th that because of the use of drugs that Dr. Oziel forced upon you, because of your sleep deprivation, because of the abuse you had suffered at his hands, that you had a great deal of difficulty sorting out when things happened and what you knew firsthand versus what you were told by Dr. Oziel?
Can we have a page?
Oh, it goes way back.
Yes, and I believe you'll also find...
Yes, hold off until, yeah, the answer is stricken. Wait till we get through. Should find it, the lawyers.
Okay. Let's start with page 13, which is 5916.
Excuse me, what portion of the tape, please?
I think if you look at 1, 2, 3, third set of JS initials. Do you recall telling them in that interview, I can't remember about this because now my memory with the boys and meetings becomes real sketchy because I'm on more medication. I'm having less sleep. I'm more frightened, not only about the boys, but that what's going to happen if Jerry abandons me. Do you remember that?
No,
Yes.
This was asked and answered by Mr. Burton when he played the tape.
All right, I'll permit this one question and answer. Answer will stand.
And was there any effort made after you made that statement by Mr. Al-Hadif or Detective Zoller to sort of separate out what you were clear about and what you were not clear about?
Objection calls for an opinion on the part of the witness.
Sustained.
Was there any effort made in close questioning by Detective Zoller?
Rephrase the question then.
Okay. Was there close questioning by Detective Zoller or Mr. Al-Hadif to see if you could specify which memories were specifically your personal knowledge, which memories were Dr. Oziel telling you things, which memories were guesswork or speculation?
Objection calls for conclusion on the part of the witness.
Were any such questions asked?
I don't recall there being any focus on that. Occasionally, I think they might have asked me, was this something, but it would be occasionally. I don't believe there was any focus on that.
With respect to the statement that you made to Detective Zoller and Mr. Al-Hadif about the guns being kept in the trunk of the car. You remember that statement?
Yes, I do.
Were you told by Dr. Oziel that he was told by one or both of the Menendez brothers that the guns were in the car when the police were there at the house?
Yes, Oziel told me that.
And did Oziel ever tell you that he was trying to advise the brothers as to how to get rid of the guns?
Yes, he did.
Dr. Oziel testified that he never gave them advice on how to get rid of the guns.
Excuse me, is that a question and a
All right, the objection is sustained.
Hadn't finished.
All right, it would still be objectionable and properly so. Ask a different question, please.
After you went to the police, there was a period of a couple of days when Dr. Oziel didn't realize that you had gone to the police. Is that right?
Objection
That's
calls
true.
for speculation on the part of the witness and Young.
Sustained as to the former ground.
You recall that the police department assisted you in tape recording telephone calls from Dr. Oziel.
Objection Young.
Correct.
Cross-examination.
Overall, the answer will stand.
Were you aware that the police department was preparing a search warrant for Dr. Oziel's property in order to find the tapes that you had told them about?
Yes.
And were you aware of a period of time between the time you first talked to the police and the time that that search warrant was served on Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And were there telephone conversations made during that period of time?
Yes.
Now, after the search warrant was served on Dr. Oziel, did you still have contact with him?
Objection Young.
Yes.
Overall, the answer will stand.
And in fact, the body wire conversation that portions of which were played to you by Mr. Burt, that was made about a week or more after the search warrant had been served on his home. Is that your understanding? It was March 19th, correct?
I believe the search warrant was on a Thursday. I know that there was some time after that.
And the body wire, before that was made, there were some phone calls between yourself and Dr. Oziel where he acknowledged knowing that you had caused the execution of that search warrant.
Yes.
Now, to the best of your understanding, in fact, the body wire occurred after Eric and Lyle were arrested.
Yes, it did.
And they were both in custody at that time.
Yes, they were.
And you understood they were in custody because you had gone to the police.
Yes.
And Dr. Oziel acknowledged that they were in custody because you had gone to the police.
Objection
Yes, he
Young.
did.
Relevance.
Sustained as to beyond the scope. Answer is
I have one other, it's foundational to one last question, Your Honor.
Well, it's easier if you just get to the question rather than going through what we've already heard.
At any time in those discussions with Dr. Oziel, after the, I'll strike that, Mr. Burt played for you some telephone contacts with Dr. Oziel after Eric and Lyle were arrested, correct?
Correct.
And in those telephone contacts, both the parts that were played and the parts that were not, was he still trying to have some kind of relationship with you?
Objection calls
Yes,
for
he
speculation on
was.
the part of the witness.
Overall, the answer will stand.
At any time during any of the contacts you had with Dr. Oziel after Eric and Lyle Menendez were arrested, did he express any sympathy or any remorse or any regret over the fact that his mouth had put his patients in jail?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
I think it bears on Dr. Oziel's state of mind.
Sustained. It's also argumentative.
Did Dr. Oziel ever express to you any sadness or sad feelings that Eric and Lyle were in jail?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
Did he ever apologize to you for anything that he did to you?
Objection relevancy.
Sustained.
You sued him, did you not?
Objection
Yes.
relevancy.
Overrule that answer will stand.
Mrs. Bozanich asked you if you were not here because you are a jilted lover. Remember that question?
Yes, I do.
Did you sue Dr. Oziel?
Yes, I did.
Did he settle with you?
Objection relevant.
Yes.
Your Honor.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you just sue him again based on the incident that you described occurred on October 26th?
Objection relevancy.
Yes.
Overruled. That answer will stand.
And Mrs. Bozanich asked you if you had meetings with defense attorneys in this case.
Yes.
And who is Steve Rubin, Ms. Smith?
Steve Rubin is my attorney, one of my attorneys.
And is he the attorney who sued Dr. Oziel for you?
Yes, he is.
Is he an attorney who specializes in mental health malpractice?
Objection
Yes, he
relevant,
does.
Your Honor.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
And for the times, on the occasions that you have met with me, was Mr. Rubin present?
Yes, he was.
And in fact, have, to the best of your knowledge, our contacts with you to set up appointments always gone through Mr. Rubin?
You don't have my phone number, so you have to go through my attorney.
You've never given us your phone number or your address for that matter.
No, I'm very protective of that information now.
So all meetings that you've had with the defense have been arranged by Mr. Rubin, your attorney?
Yes, they have.
In fact, the very first interview the defense did with you was at Mr. Rubin's office.
Yes, it was.
And relevant.
It is leading, but the answer will stand.
And at that first meeting, do you recall who the defense attorneys were who met with you?
It was yourself and Miss Lansing.
And do you recall what year that meeting was in?
I would be guessing, but I think like somewhere around 92.
Over a year ago.
Well over a year ago.
And the more recent meetings occurred after you were subpoenaed to be a witness?
Correct.
And those meetings were with Mr. Burt and sometimes myself?
Correct.
And Mr. Rubin?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. When were you subpoenaed to be a witness for the defense in this?
All right, we've got a little bit of recross and then we'll be done. This is a long one here. Whoops. Recross.
Case?
The exact date, I'm not sure, but it was a couple of months ago, I believe.
Ms. Smith, I believe you indicated that as recently as October the 26th of 1993 that you were physically assaulted by Dr. Oziel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that this occurred in the law offices of Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher in the presence of attorneys and a court reporter?
Yes, it did.
And I believe you've indicated, at least on your original direct examination, that you were not asked during your interview with the police on the 6th of March to distinguish between what you heard and what was told to you. Do you remember your testimony when you were talking to Mr. Burt the first time?
Yes.
At page 5880. Question was asked of you, what did he say? You answered on this. Are you ready? Okay, 5880, the first EA. Mr. Al-Hadif asked you, what did he say? And you said, on this night, he was more or less trying to just be reassuring to Lyle of his confidentiality. Elliot Al-Hadif asked you, tell us what you hear.
Your Honor, I'm going to object if this is not proper impeachment for the court.
Overruled.
Page 5909.
Are you asking?
I already testified, though, that there were some times that they may have asked me, but that in particular about the scenario, they did not.
At page 5909. The second entry that says LZ. Were you asked during your 5909? During the course of this conversation, Detective Zoller asks you, now tell us, were you able to hear any of the conversation at the second meeting? You answered, yeah, some of it. Detective Zoller asked, what did you hear? He specifically at that point asked you what you heard. Was that your understanding at the time that he was asking you what you had heard?
I was extremely traumatized and without sleep at the time that I went to that interview, and I think that, I've already said to you that there may have been times that they said, but I actually don't know. At the time that I went to them, I had a great deal of information programmed into me by Oziel.
Ms. Smith, you've been trying to indicate to these juries that the police were not interested in knowing exactly what you heard, that they somehow only cared about the facts and weren't interested in distinguishing between what you heard and what was told to you.
In regards to the scenario.
Argumentative.
Objection sustained. The question is argumentative.
Ms. Smith, you were asked by the defense attorneys, both by Ms. Abramson and by Mr. Burt, if you were asked by the police to distinguish between what you heard and what was said to you by Dr. Oziel. Do you remember the questions from the defense attorneys in that regard?
Objection argumentative.
Excuse me,
Yes. Okay. She wants you to speak a little slower. Why don't you do that?
Ms. Smith, do you remember the questioning by Mr. Burt today where he asked you about whether the police had distinguished between what you heard and what was said to you?
Yes.
Do you remember the questions of Ms. Abramson right now where she was asking you whether there was this distinction when the police were asking you between what you heard and what you were told by Dr. Oziel.
Yes.
Okay. Now, at page 5875. The bottom of the page, the last entry, Mr. Al-Hadif asked you. The bottom of the page, Mr. Al-Hadif asked you, at any time when you're sitting there with Lyle, did you hear anything that's going on? Answer, at that point, no, because I think they were pretty much waiting for Lyle. Mr. Al-Hadif, how about before that, while Eric was in there initially when you got there? And then you go on to answer that. And then in the middle of the page, Mr. Al-Hadif asked you, the time that you were there with Lyle in the waiting room, could you hear Jerry and Eric speaking at all? Do you remember Mr. Al-Hadif specifically asking you about what you heard when you went to talk to him on March 6th?
I don't remember. I've already testified that as far as the scenario goes, they did not want me to differentiate. As far as other times go, I just moments ago said that yes, they may have asked me to the difference between did I hear this or not. So why do you have to ask me this question a dozen times?
Your Honor, may the last comment of the witness be stricken, please?
Oh, the answer will stand. Ask the next question.
And Ms. Smith, at page 5878,
He didn't strike it. That's funny. That was funny.
in the middle, below the middle of the page, Mr. Al-Hadif again.
Just a moment, John. I'd like a chance to read this because if it isn't proper impeachment, perhaps it should be shown to the witness.
Okay, first of all, just read it yourself without comment, and if there's an objection, you can state it.
And again, Ms. Smith, Mr. Al-Hadif asked you, what could you hear at this point?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, without reading the sentence above it. I don't know if the court has. Does the court have it?
I have them, but I haven't been reading them at this point. You feel it is out of context with that?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you put that sentence in there?
All right, the answer before.
And the paragraph above makes it very clear.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I believe that they can do redirect if they desire.
They could, but we would rather they not. Let's see if we can finish this, please.
Okay, so I'll start reading from where it says JS. It's the third JS. So after Lyle goes in with Jerry, then I changed again so I could open the door because I figured that now it was more, no, Mr. Al-Hadif, more threats since there's two of them. You say more threats, and so I was really paying more attention to what was going on and what was being said. And basically out of that conversation, what I overheard, but also later I have to tell you, after they had gone, Jerry told me word for word the session.
Okay, the witness was talking to me indicating that she couldn't hear you
I
because...
find the term very offensive.
Okay, well, if the tone is offensive, does that affect your ability to hear?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I feel like I'm a pawn and manipulated and continually being used in this situation.
All right.
Her last comment be certain, please. There's no
All
question.
right. The remark of the witness is stricken.
All right, I'm going to show this to you. Starting here. Right, now in this particular passage, which you've just read to yourself, it indicates you tell police that you're commingling what you heard and what you were told by Dr. Oziel later. Isn't that correct?
That I'm commingling?
Okay.
Is that the word that was used?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then why don't you quote it?
So after Lyle goes in with Jerry, and then I changed again so I could open the door because I figured that now it was more, more threats since there are two of them, you were asked? More threats, and so I was really paying more attention to what was going on and what was being said. And basically out of that conversation, what I overheard, but also later I have to tell you, after they had gone, Jerry told me word for word the session. So in that particular passage, you're indicating that you heard things and you were told things, correct?
Correct.
And then later on, Mr. Al-Hadif asks you, Mr. Al-Hadif says, okay, and you say, Jerry has a very good memory too, although unfortunately he manipulates real facts to fit things and manipulates. And then Mr. Al-Hadif says, what could you hear then at this point? Correct?
Yes.
And so it is correct then, after the passages I've read you, that the police and Mr. Al-Hadif did ask you to distinguish between what you had heard and what you've been told. Isn't that true?
That's true. I think I said that in the answer before.
May everything be stricken after that's true, please, Your Honor?
No, let's get on to some other question if there is any.
I'm finished.
Okay, any redirect?
No, but I need to put it on.
Sure.
All right. That is it for Ms. Judalon Smith. So far, she's been my favorite witness. I think the boy's aunt was probably a pretty close second. She was really a good witness too. Even though she was Jose's sister, she had some very not nice things to say about Jose. So, I mean, after all of these witnesses, we're starting to finally get a picture, I think, of what, well, this has this whole other drama with Dr. Oziel, but at least Judalon Smith had her own drama with Dr. Oziel, but we know now, we're just getting a better picture, I think, of what was going on in that house, and it's going to come together even more as we get through the defense's case and some expert witnesses, and we have more family to get through. We've got some more of the Cano family and cousins and relatives and things like that in the next episodes. So please be sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of these. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Take care. Bye now. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.